You don't belong here. The words sliced through the rain before Evelyn Crowhurst even saw who spoke them. She stood frozen at her son's grave, white roses trembling in her gloved hands, staring at the impossible. A black woman in a soaked waitress uniform, kneeling in the mud with a small boy clutched to her chest, both of them crying over her dead son's headstone. Then the child looked up. Those eyes. Daniel's eyes. The same storm gray that had looked at her across boardroom tables and breakfast plates for 34 years. Her grip tightened on the roses until thorns bit through Italian leather. This wasn't grief anymore. This was war. We invite you to follow this story to its stunning conclusion. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. The rain had turned the cemetery into a battlefield of memory and mud. Evelyn Crowhurst had buried her son 3 months ago on a day much like this one. Cold, merciless, the kind of weather that made even privilege feel temporary. She'd returned every Sunday since, always alone, always before dawn when the groundskeepers hadn't yet arrived to witness a billionaire on her knees. But this Sunday, someone had gotten there first. The woman didn't look up when Evelyn's heels clicked against the stone path. She remained bent over Daniel's grave, one arm wrapped around a boy who couldn't have been more than 7, the other hand pressed flat against the wet marble as if drawing strength from the dead. Her waitress uniform, the kind from those family diners Evelyn only knew from the windows of passing cars, clung to her like a second skin, the name tag barely visible but there. Nia. "Excuse me." Evelyn's voice carried the particular chill of someone accustomed to obedience. "This is a private family plot." The woman's shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn around. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly steady for someone kneeling in a graveyard in the rain. "I know exactly whose plot this is, Mrs. Crowhurst." Something cold slithered down Evelyn's spine that had nothing to do with the weather. "How do you know my name?" Finally, the woman stood. She was younger than Evelyn had first thought, maybe 30, with the kind of beauty that hard work tried to hide but couldn't quite erase. Her eyes, when they met Evelyn's, held no deference, no fear, just a terrible, bone-deep sadness that looked almost like pity. "The same way you're about to know mine." She pulled the boy closer. He pressed his face into her side, but not before Evelyn caught another glimpse of those eyes. Daniel's eyes. "My name is Nia Carter. This is Lucas, and before you ask, yes, he's your grandson." The world tilted. Evelyn heard herself laugh, a sharp sound that scattered crows from nearby trees. "That's absurd. My son never, he would have told me. Your son didn't know." Nia's voice cut clean through the objection. "His mother made sure of that." "His mother?" The words came out strangled. Nia reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph, its edges worn soft from handling. She held it out, waiting. Evelyn didn't want to take it. Taking it meant this was real, meant this rain-soaked woman in a cheap uniform could shatter 3 months of carefully constructed mourning with a single piece of paper. She took it anyway. The photo showed Daniel, younger, laughing in a way Evelyn hadn't seen since before business school hardened him into something worthy of the Crowhurst name. He had his arm around a woman with warm brown skin and an infectious smile, her hand resting on a visible baby bump. They looked happy, carelessly, dangerously happy. "Her name was Maya Richardson," Nia said quietly. "She worked at the foundation your son used to volunteer at. Before you convinced him that charity work was beneath a Crowhurst, they were together for almost 2 years. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the photograph. "I would have known. You would have destroyed it." There was no accusation in Nia's tone, just statement of fact. "Maya knew that. She'd seen what happened to the last woman your son brought home, the journalist you had fired from every publication in the state. So she kept Lucas a secret, protected him from the life she knew you'd force on him." "If this is true," Evelyn's lawyer brain was already working, already building defenses. "If my son had a child, why am I only hearing about it now? Why wait until he's dead?" Nia's expression shifted into something harder. "Because Maya is dead too, breast cancer. Took her 6 months ago." She looked down at Lucas, who had started shivering despite the raincoat Nia had draped over his small shoulders. "She made me promise to tell Daniel after she was gone. Made me promise to give him the choice she never did, so I tried. Tried. I called your son's office 17 times. Each number landed like a stone. Left messages explaining who I was, who Lucas was. Begged for 5 minutes of his time. I didn't want money. I didn't want anything except for him to know his son existed. Her voice cracked, just barely. Then I saw the news about the car accident. Realized I'd been calling a dead man for 2 weeks, and nobody at your company bothered to update his voicemail. Evelyn felt something twist in her chest. Guilt, maybe, or just the recognition of a truth she'd been avoiding. Daniel had been erratic those last few months. Distracted, making mistakes in board meetings, missing family dinners. She'd attributed it to stress, to the weight of eventually inheriting an empire. Now she wondered what messages he'd actually received, what he'd been trying to process alone. This doesn't prove anything, she said, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. A photograph and a story. I have his birth certificate. Nia's interruption was gentle but firm. Medical records showing Maya's pregnancy. Text messages between her and Daniel from before she cut contact. I have a shoebox full of letters she wrote to him but never sent, explaining everything, apologizing for everything. She shifted her weight, pulling Lucas even closer. And I have a little boy who just lost the only mother he's ever known, who never got to meet his father, and who deserves to know he comes from something more than just me working double shifts at a diner. The boy, Lucas, finally looked up at Evelyn. The resemblance was devastating. Not just the eyes, but the shape of his face, the way his hair fell across his forehead. This was Daniel at 7, before boarding schools and etiquette lessons, and the slow, careful process of turning a child into an heir. Why are you telling me this? Evelyn heard herself ask. If Maya wanted to keep him away from me, from us, why not honor that? For the first time, Nia's composure cracked. Tears mixed with rain on her face. Because I'm 29 years old, Mrs. Crowhurst. I work 2 jobs to afford a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where I'm afraid to let Lucas play outside. I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough. It's never enough. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Maya was my best friend. She made me Lucas's godmother because she trusted me to do what was right for him, even when it hurt. And what's right is that he should know his family. He should know his father existed. He should know... She stopped, swallowing hard. He should know he's not alone in this world. Evelyn looked at the grave between them. Daniel's name carved in marble that cost more than most people earned in a year. She'd chosen the stone herself, approved the inscription, paid for security to keep strangers away during the funeral. All that control, all that power, and she'd never felt more helpless than she did in this moment. I need time, she said finally, to verify your claims, to understand. I expected that. Nia reached into her other pocket and pulled out a business card, slightly damp. This is my number, my address, my work schedule. I have nothing to hide. She paused. But Mrs. Crowhurst, whatever you decide to do with this information, whatever lawyers you call, whatever investigators you hire, please remember that Lucas didn't choose any of this. He's 7 years old. He's scared. And he just wants to know why his mommy had to die. With that, Nia took Lucas's hand and began walking away. The boy looked back once, those impossible eyes finding Evelyn's across the rain-swept cemetery. Then they were gone, disappearing between headstones like ghosts she'd summoned but couldn't control. Evelyn stood alone at her son's grave, the photograph still clutched in her hand, and for the first time since Daniel's death, she allowed herself to truly break. The rain had stopped by the time Marcus Webb arrived at Evelyn's penthouse. Her head of security, ex-FBI, discretion guaranteed, found her standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, still wearing her cemetery clothes. You said it was urgent, he said, closing the door behind him with the practiced silence of a man who'd walked into countless private catastrophes. Evelyn didn't turn around. I need a complete background check on a woman named Nia Carter. Current residence, employment history, financial records, criminal record if she has one. I need to know everything. Who she talks to, where she goes, what debts she carries. She paused. And I need it done quietly. How quietly? The kind that doesn't leave traces. Now she did turn, and Marcus saw something in her face that made him straighten unconsciously. I also need a DNA test verified by 3 independent laboratories, chain of custody documentation. something that would hold up in court. Marcus had worked for the Crowhurst family for 15 years. He knew better than to ask unnecessary questions. The child? Allegedly, my grandson. The word felt strange in her mouth, foreign. I need to know if that's true. And if it is, Evelyn turned back to the window. The city sprawled below her, a kingdom of glass and steel she'd helped her late husband build. Daniel had been meant to expand it, to carry their name into another generation of power and influence. Instead, he died in a car accident on a rainy Tuesday, and she'd been left to rule an empire with no heir, no legitimate heir. Then we'll discuss next steps, she said quietly. But Marcus, this stays between us. Not the board, not the lawyers, not even my assistant. If word gets out before I'm ready to control the narrative, understood. He moved toward the door, then hesitated. Mrs. Crowhurst, if I may, what did she want? The woman at the cemetery? Evelyn closed her eyes. She said she wanted Lucas to know his family, to know he's not alone. And what do you want? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. What did she want? To protect the family name, to preserve Daniel's memory, to punish the woman who'd kept his child a secret, or to hold her grandson and try to explain why the world had taken everything from him before he'd even learned to understand loss? I want the truth, she said finally. Everything else comes after that. The truth came back in a folder so thick Marcus needed both hands to carry it. Evelyn read it alone in her study, the same room where she and her late husband had made the decisions that built their fortune. Every page felt like a small betrayal of assumptions she'd built without knowing she was building them. Nia Carter, age 29. Born in Detroit to a single mother who cleaned houses and took night classes to earn a nursing degree. Nia had followed a similar path, community college while working full-time, degree in early childhood education she'd never been able to use because Maya got sick and somebody had to pay the medical bills. No criminal record. No debts beyond student loans and the mortgage on Maya Richardson's hospital care that she'd somehow taken on as her own. The waitressing job at Mel's Diner paid $8.75 an hour plus tips. The overnight stocking position at a grocery store added another $12. Between them, she managed to keep Lucas in a school district that wasn't actively failing its students and put food on a table in an apartment Marcus's photos showed was clean but spare. The kind of spare that came from having to choose between furniture and rent. Everything she'd told Evelyn at the cemetery was true. Every word. The DNA results came in the next day, processed by 3 separate laboratories that didn't know they were confirming each other's work. Marcus laid them out on Evelyn's desk in a neat row, their conclusions identical. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Evelyn stared at the numbers until they blurred. Somewhere in this city, a little boy was eating breakfast before school, maybe cereal from a generic box, maybe toast if Nia had scraped together enough for bread, and he carried Daniel's blood. Her blood. He was a Crowhurst, whether he knew it or not. The question was what to do about it. She called her lawyer first. Richard Chen had handled the family's legal affairs for 2 decades, navigating divorces and mergers and the occasional scandal with equal discretion. He arrived within the hour, already knowing from her tone that this wasn't routine estate management. Tell me about custody law, Evelyn said without preamble. Richard's expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation in his eyes. That's a broad topic. Could you narrow the parameters? A child, biological grandparent, single guardian with no blood relation. She watched his face carefully. What are my options? For visitation? That depends on the state and the willingness of the guardian. Most courts favor arrangements that don't disrupt. Not visitation. The interruption was sharp. Full custody. Now Richard did react, just a slight tightening around his eyes. Mrs. Crowhurst, that's significantly more complex. Courts are extremely reluctant to remove a child from a stable home environment. You'd need to prove the current guardian is unfit or that the child is in danger. Evelyn thought of Nia's worn hands, her double shifts, the apartment that was clean but couldn't hide what poverty looked like when it tried its best. Define unfit. Abuse, neglect, substance dependency, inability to provide basic care. Richard leaned forward. But even then, the burden of proof is high. Courts have generally held that financial hardship alone doesn't constitute unfitness, especially if the guardian is otherwise meeting the child's needs. What if I could offer substantially better resources? Education, healthcare, opportunities? Those are factors, certainly. But you'd still need to demonstrate that remaining with the current guardian would cause the child harm. He paused. May I ask what this is about? Evelyn slid the DNA results across the desk, watched Richard's professional composure crack just slightly as he processed what they meant. I have a grandson, she said quietly, and he's being raised in poverty by a woman who works herself to exhaustion just to keep him fed. Tell me, Richard, is that not harm? To deny a child everything his birthright should guarantee? Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a careful neutrality that Evelyn recognized as professional distance from moral judgment. The law would likely say that a loving home with limited resources is preferable to uncertainty, regardless of financial advantage. But he held up a hand as Evelyn started to object. There are ways to pursue this. We'd need to document any deficiencies in the current living situation. Build a case that you could provide not just wealth, but stability and family connection. It would be expensive, potentially ugly. The guardian would certainly fight back, and courts tend to sympathize with, I don't care about sympathy. Evelyn's voice could have frozen fire. I care about results. How long would it take? 6 months, minimum. Possibly longer if the guardian has adequate legal representation. She's a waitress who can barely afford rent. What legal representation? Richard's expression suggested he'd heard that confidence before, usually right before things got complicated. Civil rights organizations often take these cases pro bono. So do law school clinics looking for practical experience. You'd be surprised what resources can materialize when the narrative becomes billionaire trying to take child from loving caretaker. Then we control the narrative. Evelyn stood, moving to the window in a gesture Marcus would have recognized. Before we file anything, I want another option explored. Which is? I want to meet with her, Nia Carter, a private conversation, just the two of us. She turned back to Richard. Maybe she'll be reasonable. Maybe we can come to an arrangement that doesn't require courts or publicity. Something that serves everyone's interests. And if she's not reasonable? Evelyn's smile held no warmth. Then we'll serve her with papers and see how long love lasts when it's buried in legal fees. The meeting was arranged for the following Thursday at 2 p.m., Nia's only break between her day and night shifts. Evelyn offered her office, neutral territory at a coffee shop, even offered to come to Nia's apartment. Nia chose the coffee shop, a small place in her neighborhood that Evelyn's driver had to search for because it didn't appear on any of the usual maps wealthy people use to navigate the city. Evelyn arrived 15 minutes early and immediately understood why Nia had chosen this place. Every eye in the shop tracked her entrance, the designer suit, the leather briefcase, the aura of money that couldn't be hidden no matter how carefully she'd chosen understated elegance. She was an invasive species in this ecosystem, and everyone knew it. Nia was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of her. She'd changed out of her waitress uniform into jeans and a sweater that had been mended at the elbow. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked exhausted and alert in equal measure, the combination of someone who'd learned to survive on insufficient sleep. Mrs. Crowhurst, Nia didn't stand. Thank you for coming to my neighborhood. I know it's not what you're used to. Evelyn sat down, waving off the barista who'd started toward them. I thought neutral ground might make this conversation easier. There's no neutral ground between us. Nia's voice was matter-of-fact. You have power and money. I have Lucas and the truth. We're starting from unequal positions, so let's not pretend otherwise. It wasn't hostility, Evelyn realized, just clarity, the kind that came from understanding exactly where you stood in the world's hierarchy and refusing to pretend the view was different. Fair enough. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. I've verified your claims. The DNA test confirms Lucas is my grandson. Everything you told me about Maya and Daniel appears to be accurate. Did you think I was lying? I hoped you were. The admission came easier than expected. It would have been simpler. Nia's expression softened almost imperceptibly. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know what it means to have your grief complicated by, she gestured vaguely, by this. But I also know what Maya wanted. She wanted Lucas to have a choice, to know where he came from. Did she want him to grow up in poverty? The question landed hard. Nia's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. She wanted him to grow up loved. Everything else was supposed to come second. Love doesn't pay for college. Evelyn leaned forward. It doesn't pay for health care or tutors or the kind of education that opens doors instead of just keeping them from closing completely. You're working yourself to death trying to give him what I could provide with a phone call. You think I don't know that? For the first time, anger crept into Nia's voice. You think I don't lie awake at night wondering if I'm selfish for keeping him? If Maya made a mistake trusting me instead of… She stopped, breathing carefully. But she didn't trust you. She specifically, explicitly didn't want Lucas raised as a Crowhurst. That has to mean something. It means she was afraid of what she didn't understand. Evelyn kept her voice gentle, reasonable. The Crowhurst name isn't a curse, Ms. Carter. It's a legacy, one that my grandson deserves to inherit. He's 7 years old. He doesn't care about legacies. He cares about whether I'll be home to help with his homework, whether we can afford to keep his cat, whether the kids at school will stop making fun of his secondhand clothes. Nia's voice cracked. Those are the things that matter to him right now, not some empire he doesn't even know exists. This was the moment. Evelyn had rehearsed it in her mind a dozen times, tested the words for the right balance of sympathy and strength. I'm not asking you to disappear from his life, she said softly. I'm asking you to let me help. Let me provide for his education, his health care. Let me set up a trust that ensures he'll never worry about money. You could quit those exhausting jobs, focus on being there for him instead of just surviving. Nia studied her for a long moment. In exchange for what? Custody. The word hung between them. Legal guardianship. He'd live with me, but you could visit. You'd still be part of his life, just not his mother. Nia finished the sentence with devastating accuracy. You want me to sell him to you for financial security. That's not… Evelyn caught herself. Rephrased. I'm offering him everything his father would have wanted him to have. Daniel was being groomed to take over a multi-billion-dollar company. Lucas has that same blood, that same potential. Are you really going to deny him that future because of pride? Because of love? Nia stood up, and Evelyn saw that her hands were shaking. Maya asked me to protect him. Not his inheritance, or his name, or his potential. Him. The little boy who still cries at night because he doesn't understand why his mommy isn't coming back. The boy who drew you a picture last week because I told him his grandmother might want to know he exists. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and placed it on the table. Evelyn opened it with trembling fingers. A child's drawing, stick figures holding hands under a crayon sun. 3 figures. One labeled me, one labeled Aunt Naya, and one labeled Grandma, with a question mark next to it. He wants to know you, Nia said quietly. I never planned to keep you apart. I hoped we could find a way for him to have both of us in his life. But not like this. Not with you trying to buy him like he's just another acquisition. Evelyn stared at the drawing, something painful lodging in her throat. What if I promise it wouldn't be like that? What if we drew up an agreement that protects your role in his life while ensuring he has access to everything he's entitled to? You can't promise that. Nia's voice was gentle now, almost pitying. Because the moment you have legal custody, the moment he's living in your house and going to your schools and being shaped by your world, I become optional. The poor woman who raised him before his real life started. And maybe that happened slowly. Maybe you don't even mean for it to happen. But it will. She picked up her cold coffee, held it for a moment like she might drink it, then set it back down. I love him enough to let him know his grandmother. I love him enough to let him have a relationship with your family, with his father's memory. But I don't love him any less than Maya did. And I'm not going to trade him for anything, not even his own inheritance. Evelyn felt the conversation slipping away from her, the careful control she'd planned dissolving like sugar in rain. Miss Carter, please, be reasonable. Think about what's best for… I am thinking about what's best for him. Nia shouldered her bag. And what's best is that he has someone who puts him first. Not his last name, not his bank account, him. When you're ready to be that person, to be his grandmother instead of his owner, call me. Until then, she glanced down at the drawing still on the table. Maybe hold on to that. Remember that he sees you as a question mark, someone who might fit into his life or might not. The answer to that question is up to you. She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving Evelyn alone with cold coffee and a child's drawing and the slow, burning realization that she'd just lost the first round of a war she hadn't known she was fighting. Evelyn sat there for a long time after Nia left, staring at the stick figure labeled Grandma with its hopeful question mark. Around her, the coffee shop returned to its normal rhythms, conversations about bills and shifts and whether the landlord would finally fix the heat. The ordinary struggles of people who couldn't solve problems with money. People like the woman raising her grandson. When she finally stood to leave, Evelyn carefully folded the drawing and placed it in her briefcase next to Richard Chen's contact information. She had a choice to make now. She could accept Nia's terms, build a relationship slowly, earn the right to be in Lucas's life instead of demanding it, or she could take what she wanted the way she'd taken everything else in her life, with lawyers and leverage and the absolute certainty that money, properly applied, could move any obstacle. The driver was waiting outside. As Evelyn slid into the back seat, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to Richard. Proceed with custody filing. Expedite everything. I want this resolved before the boy's birthday. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then turned her attention to the window as the car pulled away from the coffee shop. In the glass reflection, she could see her own face, hard, determined, certain. She didn't look like a grandmother. She looked like what she was. A woman who'd built an empire and refused to let anyone, even a waitress with nothing to lose, tell her what she couldn't have. The question mark in Lucas's drawing flickered in her mind like an accusation. She closed the briefcase and didn't open it again until she was back in her office, where the view from the top floor reminded her exactly who she was and what she could do. The war Nia didn't know had started was about to begin in earnest, and Evelyn Crowhurst had never lost a fight that mattered. The legal papers arrived at Nia's apartment on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed over the envelope. She signed for it with hands that had learned not to shake during the years she'd spent watching Maya die by degrees, then closed the door and leaned against it until her breathing steadied. Inside, Lucas was eating cereal at their small kitchen table, his legs swinging beneath the chair because his feet didn't quite reach the floor. He looked up when she came in, milk on his upper lip, those impossible gray eyes bright with the resilience of children who haven't yet learned that the world breaks people. Who was that, Aunt Nia? Just someone delivering mail, baby. She forced her voice to stay light, easy. Finish your breakfast. We need to leave for school in 10 minutes. He went back to his cereal, humming something he'd learned in music class, while Nia opened the envelope in the hallway where he couldn't see her face. The document inside was thick, printed on expensive paper that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. Legal terminology crowded every page, but certain phrases jumped out with brutal clarity. Petition for full legal custody. Best interests of the minor child. Inadequate financial resources of current guardian. Superior ability to provide educational and developmental opportunities. Nia read it twice, then a third time, waiting for the rage to come. It didn't. Instead, she felt something colder settle in her chest. The same clarity that had descended when the doctor told her Maya's cancer was terminal and they needed to start planning for Lucas's future. The clarity that came when there was no room left for anything but survival. She walked Lucas to school like always, holding his hand at crosswalks, listening to him chatter about a class pet hamster and whether they could get one too. At the school gates, she knelt down and hugged him tighter than usual. You okay, Aunt Nia? His small hand patted her back with the unconscious comfort children offer when they sense adult distress they can't name. I'm perfect, sweetheart. She pulled back and made herself smile. I love you. You know that, right? No matter what happens, I love you so much. I love you too. He said it easily, carelessly, the way children do when they don't yet understand that love might not be enough. Then he was gone, running toward his friends, and Nia was alone on the sidewalk with a custody petition in her bag and 8 hours before her evening shift started. She didn't go home. Instead, she took 2 buses to the public library in a better neighborhood, the one with newer computers and faster internet. The reference librarian, an older black woman with silver braids and kind eyes, took one look at Nia's face and directed her to a quiet corner desk without asking questions. Nia spent the next 6 hours reading everything she could find about custody law, grandparents' rights, legal precedents involving non-biological guardians. The more she read, the colder that clarity in her chest became. Evelyn wasn't just threatening to take Lucas. She had a legitimate case. Courts did favor biological family. They did consider financial stability. A billionaire grandmother versus a waitress with no blood relation wasn't a fight. It was a massacre waiting to happen. Unless Nia changed the rules of engagement. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found a name she hadn't called in 3 years. Pressed dial before she could talk herself out of it. The woman who answered sounded older, wearier than Nia remembered. Carter residence? Mrs. Carter, it's Nia. Silence on the other end, long enough that Nia wondered if the call had dropped. Mom, are you there? I'm here. Her mother's voice was careful, controlled. The same tone she'd used when Nia dropped out of college to take care of Maya, when Nia moved across the state to give Lucas stability, when Nia stopped calling because every conversation became a referendum on choices her mother couldn't understand. I didn't expect to hear from you. I know. Nia closed her eyes. I need help. Legal help. Do you still have that connection at the Civil Rights Law Center? The one you used to volunteer with? Another silence, shorter this time. What kind of trouble are you in? The kind that comes from doing the right thing. Nia's voice cracked despite her best efforts. Someone's trying to take Lucas from me. Someone with enough money to make it happen unless I find a way to fight back. She heard her mother breathe out slowly. Tell me everything. Nia did. The whole story spilled out in that quiet corner of the library. Maya's death, the promise she'd made Daniel Crowhurst, the cemetery encounter, the failed negotiation at the coffee shop. The custody petition that had arrived that morning like a declaration of war. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. Then, you should have called me sooner. I thought I could handle it myself. That's always been your problem, baby, thinking you have to carry everything alone. But there was warmth in her mother's voice now, the first Nia had heard in years. I'll make some calls. The law center has changed since I was there, but I still know people. People who specialize in exactly this kind of fight. Mom, I can't afford… Did I ask if you could afford it? Her mother's interruption was sharp but not unkind. You're my daughter. That boy is my grandson in every way that matters. Let me help you protect him. Nia felt tears she'd been holding back since the cemetery finally break free. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This won't be easy. People like this Crowhurst woman, they're used to winning. They're used to the world rearranging itself around their money. A pause. But they're not used to people who fight back. People who have nothing to lose except the things that actually matter. The call ended with promises to talk soon, with her mother's assurance that she'd reach out to the law center that day. Nia sat in the library until her shift started, reading and rereading the custody petition, looking for weaknesses the way Maya used to look for patterns in crossword puzzles, patiently, methodically, refusing to accept that any problem was truly unsolvable. By the time she left for work, she'd filled a notebook with questions, observations, and the beginnings of a plan that felt less like hope and more like controlled desperation. The diner was busy that night, full of truckers and late-shift workers seeking coffee and comfort food. Nia moved through her tables with practiced efficiency, smiling at regulars, remembering orders, existing in the performance of competent service that made her invisible to most of the people she served. She was refilling coffee when she felt someone watching her. Not the usual gaze of customers trying to catch her attention, but something more focused, more deliberate. The woman sat alone in a corner booth, late 40s maybe, wearing a blazer that suggested lawyer or consultant or some other profession where women had to dress like they were perpetually headed to court. She had a laptop open but hadn't touched it since Nia noticed her. Instead, she'd been watching Nia work with the kind of attention that made instincts honed by years of service work start screaming warnings. Nia approached with her coffee pot and professional smile. Can I get you anything else? Actually, yes. The woman's voice was measured, professional. You can tell me if you're Nia Carter. Every alarm in Nia's head went off at once. Who's asking? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm an investigator hired by Evelyn Crowhurst to conduct surveillance and document your daily activities as they pertain to the custody case. She said it matter-of-factly, as if announcing she was from the health department. I've been following you for 3 days. I know your schedule, your routes, where you take Lucas to school. I know you work 2 jobs and average 4 hours of sleep per night. I know your apartment has a leak in the bathroom you can't afford to fix, and that Lucas's winter coat is 2 sizes too small. Nia's hand tightened on the coffee pot. Around them, the diner continued its normal rhythms, oblivious to the fact that her life was being cataloged and weaponized in a corner booth. Is there a point to this visit? Nia asked, quietly. Or are you just here to remind me how thoroughly I'm being violated? Something flickered in Jennifer's expression. Regret, maybe, or recognition of a line being crossed. I'm here because I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've learned to recognize when I'm on the wrong side of a story. She closed her laptop. Everything I just told you is true. Everything I've documented will be used to paint you as an unfit guardian. But here's what my report won't say. I've also documented that Lucas is happy, that he's thriving academically despite the circumstances, that you attend every parent-teacher conference and volunteer for school events, even when you're running on no sleep, that the apartment might be small, but it's clean and safe and full of love. Then why tell Mrs. Crowhurst anything different? Because she's paying me to find evidence that supports her case, and I'm good at my job. Jennifer pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. But I'm not comfortable with what this is becoming, so I wanted to give you a heads up. You're not just fighting Evelyn Crowhurst. You're fighting an entire apparatus designed to win at any cost. Private investigators, lawyers who bill by the minute, expert witnesses who'll testify that poverty constitutes emotional harm. They're going to pick apart every aspect of your life and present it in the worst possible light. Nia stared at the business card without touching it. Why are you telling me this? Because I have a daughter. Jennifer's voice softened. And if someone tried to take her from me because I couldn't afford the right zip code, I'd want someone to give me a fighting chance. She stood, leaving cash on the table for a meal she hadn't eaten. You should know, there are others, other investigators, other people watching you. Not all of them will have the conscience to warn you. She left without another word, and Nia stood there holding a coffee pot and watching the door swing closed, feeling the walls of her carefully constructed life closing in from every direction. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. Law Center wants to meet tomorrow, 9 a.m. Can you make it? Nia texted back with hands that wanted to shake but wouldn't let themselves. I'll be there. The Law Center occupied the 2nd floor of a building that had seen better decades, wedged between a check-cashing place and a laundromat in a neighborhood where gentrification hadn't quite reached. Nia arrived 15 minutes early and spent the time in her car, breathing, preparing herself for whatever came next. The woman who greeted her in the waiting room was younger than expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a handshake that communicated competence without needing to prove it. Ms. Carter, I'm Rebecca Santos. Your mother called yesterday. Please come to my office. The office was small but organized, walls covered with certificates and photos of Rebecca with clients, at protests, accepting awards from organizations Nia recognized from the news. This wasn't just a lawyer. This was someone who'd made a career out of fighting systems designed to crush people like Nia. Rebecca gestured to a chair and settled behind her desk with the custody petition Nia had emailed the night before. I've reviewed the filing. It's aggressive but not surprising given the resources involved. Evelyn Crowhurst is represented by Chen and Associates, one of the most expensive family law firms in the state. They're going to argue that your financial situation constitutes an inability to meet Lucas's needs. But I am meeting his needs. Nia heard the defensiveness in her voice and tried to soften it. He's healthy. He's doing well in school. He's happy. I believe you. Rebecca's interruption was gentle. But we need to understand how the court will view this. You work 2 jobs to make ends meet, which means you're not physically present as much as someone with more resources. Lucas's school is adequate but not exceptional. His medical care is basic. When they put experts on the stand to talk about optimal child development, about the advantages wealth can provide, about stability and opportunity, We need to be ready with more than love. The words hit like body blows. Naya had known this, had read about it in the library, but hearing it spoken aloud in this small office made it real in a way research couldn't. So what do we do? Rebecca leaned forward. We build a counter-narrative. We document not just that you're meeting Lucas's needs, but that you're exceeding them in the ways that actually matter to a child. We get testimony from his teachers, his doctor, his friends' parents. We show the court what his life actually looks like versus what it looks like on paper. And she paused, choosing words carefully. We make this about more than just you versus Evelyn Crowhurst. We make it about what happens when wealth tries to purchase children from people who love them. A PR campaign. A truth campaign. Rebecca's correction was firm. Because the moment this becomes public, which it will, people are going to have opinions. Some will say you're keeping a child from his rightful family. Others will say Evelyn is trying to buy what she couldn't earn. We need to control that narrative before it controls us. Nia thought about Jennifer Walsh in the diner, about being followed and documented and reduced to a file of inadequacies. How much will this cost? Because I need to be honest with you. I have maybe $3,000 in savings. That's it. We work on contingency and pro bono for cases like this. Your mother's history with the center helps, but even without that, this is exactly the kind of case we exist to fight. Rebecca pulled out a contract. What I need from you isn't money. It's complete honesty, no surprises, no skeletons in closets that will blow up during testimony. If there's anything in your past or present that could be used against you, I need to know now. Nia thought for a long moment. I got a speeding ticket 2 years ago. Couldn't afford to pay it right away, so it went to collections. I was late on rent once when Maya's hospital bills came due. She stopped, feeling shame creep up her throat. I've made mistakes. I'm not perfect. But I've never hurt Lucas. I've never put him in danger. Everything I do is for him. That's what we'll prove. Rebecca slid the contract across the desk. But Ms. Carter, Nia, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. This will get ugly. They'll dig into every aspect of your life. They'll try to make you look unstable, incapable, even selfish for keeping Lucas from his rightful family. You'll be scrutinized in ways you can't imagine. Are you prepared for that? Nia picked up the pen. I watched my best friend die over 6 months. I held her hand while she made me promise to protect her son. I've worked jobs that left me too tired to stand just so he could have clean clothes and hot meals. I'm prepared for whatever they throw at me. She signed the contract with a hand that didn't shake even once. Good. Rebecca stood, and Nia realized the meeting was over. I'll file our response to the petition today. And Nia, get ready. Because once we push back, Evelyn Crowhurst is going to push harder. People like her don't accept no gracefully. Nia left the law center feeling something she hadn't felt since the process server knocked on her door. Not hope exactly, but the possibility of a fight that wasn't already lost. She had an ally now, someone who knew how to navigate the system that was designed to favor people like Evelyn. But Rebecca was right about one thing. This was about to get uglier. The story broke 3 days later. Nia first saw it on her phone during her break at the grocery store, a notification from a news app she barely used. The headline made her stomach drop. Waitress keeps billionaire's grandson in poverty. Legal battle exposes class divide in custody dispute. The article was carefully written, legally precise, but its implications were brutal. It painted Evelyn as a grieving grandmother trying to provide for her deceased son's child, and Nia as an obstacle standing between Lucas and his birthright. There were photos. Nia's apartment building, the diner where she worked, Lucas's school with its chain-link fence and peeling paint. Then photos of the Crowhurst estate, the private schools that could be his, the future he was supposedly being denied. Comment section exploded with opinions. Some supported Nia. Love matters more than money. This is what rich people do, buy children like property. But others were vicious. Keeping a child in poverty is abuse. She's selfish. Give the boy to his real family. Her phone started ringing. Unknown numbers. Reporters, probably, though she didn't answer to find out. At work that night, customers who'd never noticed her before suddenly had opinions about her life. Some were supportive, leaving extra-large tips and telling her to hang in there. Others looked at her with barely concealed disgust, as if she'd been caught stealing from someone deserving. By the end of the week, she couldn't take Lucas to school without someone filming them on their phone. At the grocery store, at the park, at the library. They were always there now, strangers with cameras and questions, and the absolute certainty that they understood a situation they knew only through headlines. Rebecca called an emergency meeting. "The publicity is actually helping us," she said, when Nia arrived at her office looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Public opinion is split, which means Evelyn can't just steamroll through this. But we need to be strategic. I want to put you on camera. A real interview where you tell your side of the story." "I can't," Nia's voice came out hoarse. "Every time I see those cameras, I just think about Lucas, about him growing up and finding all this online. Finding out his childhood became a spectator sport. He's going to find it anyway." Rebecca's bluntness wasn't cruel, just honest. "The question is whether he finds only Evelyn's version or whether he finds yours too. Whether he understands that you fought for him." Nia closed her eyes. Saw Maya in that hospital bed, making her promise. Saw Lucas at the kitchen table this morning, asking why people kept taking his picture. Saw the future splitting into two paths, one where she stayed silent and let others define her story, another where she fought back with the only weapon she had left. Truth. "Okay," she said, "set it up. But Rebecca, I'm not doing this to win public opinion. I'm doing it so Lucas knows someday that I didn't hide, that when someone tried to take him from me, I stood up and said no." Rebecca smiled for the first time since Nia had met her. "That's exactly the energy we need." The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 6 p.m., prime time on a local news program that had been covering the story. Rebecca coached her for hours. What to say, what to avoid, how to stay calm when the interviewer inevitably asked questions designed to make her look bad. But when the cameras started rolling, when the interviewer, a polished woman named Diane Patterson, asked her first question, Nia forgot all the coaching. She just told the truth. "Why do you think you're better suited to raise Lucas than his biological grandmother?" Diane asked, her tone neutral but weighted with implication. Nia looked directly at the camera. "I don't think I'm better suited because I'm richer or more educated or because I can give him things Mrs. Crowhurst can. I think I'm better suited because I've been there. Because when he wakes up crying for his mother, I'm the one who holds him until he falls back asleep. Because I know which nightlight makes him feel safe and which stories help him calm down and exactly how he likes his sandwiches cut. Not because I'm special, but because I've done the work. Day after day, month after month, I've been the person who shows up." But Mrs. Crowhurst argues she can provide opportunities you simply can't match. Elite education, travel, connections that could shape his entire future. She can provide things. Nia's interruption was gentle but firm. "I provide a home. And those aren't the same. Lucas doesn't need a mansion. He needs someone who sees him, who knows him, who loves him for who he is right now, instead of who he might become if given the right resources." She paused, feeling emotion rise in her throat. "Mrs. Crowhurst sees him as an heir. I see him as a little boy who's already lost too much. That's the difference." Diane leaned forward. "Some people say you're being selfish, that you're keeping him from his heritage, his family, his birthright as a Crowhurst. Those people don't know what it means to be 7 years old and scared." Nia's voice hardened. "They don't know what it's like to lose your mother and then have strangers show up trying to take away the only stability you have left. I'm not keeping Lucas from anything. I'm protecting him from people who think children are possessions to be claimed rather than human beings who deserve to feel safe." The interview continued for 20 minutes, but that exchange was what made the news. It played on loop across social media, dissected by commentators and shared by thousands. The narrative began to shift, not completely, but enough that Evelyn Crowhurst's certainty of victory suddenly had cracks in its foundation. That night, after Lucas was asleep, Nia sat on the fire escape of their apartment and let herself cry. Not from fear or exhaustion, though she felt both. From the terrible understanding that she'd just made this fight exponentially more public, more brutal, more impossible to walk away from. Her phone buzzed, a text from Rebecca. "You were perfect. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start building the case that wins this." Nia texted back, "How do we win against someone with infinite resources?" The response came quickly. "We make them fight on ground where money doesn't matter, where the only thing that counts is truth." Nia stared at those words for a long time, then climbed back through the window to check on Lucas one more time before trying to sleep. He was curled around his stuffed cat, peaceful in a way that made her chest ache. She'd meant what she'd told Diane Patterson. She'd meant every word. But as she watched Lucas sleep, she couldn't help wondering if love really would be enough. If protection really could stand against power. If a waitress who worked 2 jobs could actually defeat a billionaire who'd never lost anything she truly wanted. In her penthouse across the city, Evelyn Crowhurst watched the interview on her tablet with Richard Chen sitting across from her. When it ended, she set the device down with careful precision. "She's better at this than we expected," Richard said quietly. Evelyn's expression revealed nothing. "Then we'll need to be better. I want everything on her, every late payment, every mistake, every moment of weakness we can find. And Richard?" She looked at him with eyes that had watched empires rise and fall. "I want you to reach out to Lucas's school. I want to know if there are any concerns, any incidents, anything that suggests instability in his home environment." That's aggressive. "If it gets out that we're investigating a 7-year-old's school records, then make sure it doesn't get out." Evelyn stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. "She wants to make this about love versus money. Fine. We'll show the court that all the love in the world doesn't matter if a child is suffering, if he's being denied opportunities, if he's being held back by someone who refuses to admit her limitations." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Crowhurst, I have to ask, is this about Lucas or is this about winning?" Evelyn didn't turn around. "It's about family. It's about ensuring my grandson has everything my son would have wanted him to have. And yes, Richard, it's about winning. Because in this world, the people who win are the ones who can protect what matters. Nia Carter is about to learn that lesson the hard way." The first crack in Evelyn's strategy appeared 3 weeks later, though she didn't recognize it as such at the time. Richard had arranged a meeting with the principal of Lucas's school. A careful conversation framed as a concerned grandmother seeking information about her grandson's well-being. The principal, Mrs. Angela Morrison, agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the school. Neutral territory, professional courtesy extended to a woman whose name carried weight, even in neighborhoods where the Crowhurst empire felt distant. Mrs. Morrison arrived exactly on time, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair and the kind of steady presence that came from 3 decades of navigating parent politics and budget cuts. She ordered tea and settled across from Evelyn with the polite wariness of someone who'd learned to spot manipulation dressed as concern. "Thank you for meeting with me," Evelyn began, her voice calibrated to convey both gratitude and the subtle authority of someone used to being accommodated. "I realize this is unusual, but given the circumstances of the custody case, I wanted to understand Lucas's situation from someone who sees him every day." Mrs. Morrison stirred honey into her tea with deliberate slowness. "Mrs. Crowhurst, before we go any further, I need to be clear about something. Whatever I share with you, I'll be sharing with Ms. Carter as well. I don't participate in information asymmetry when it comes to my students' welfare." The response was unexpected enough that Evelyn had to recalibrate. "Of course. I'm not asking you to betray any confidences. I simply want to know if Lucas is thriving, if there are concerns about his home environment that might not be apparent to someone who only sees him outside of school." "Lucas is one of my best students." Mrs. Morrison's answer came without hesitation. "He's reading above grade level, his math skills are excellent, and his teachers consistently report that he's engaged and curious. He has friends, he participates in class discussions, and he's never once come to school hungry or in clothes that weren't clean and appropriate." Evelyn felt something shift in her chest. Pride, maybe, or the uncomfortable recognition that her assumptions might be wrong. "That's wonderful to hear, but socially, emotionally. The custody petition mentions that he's experienced significant trauma, losing his mother, the instability of Ms. Carter's work schedule. He has experienced trauma." Mrs. Morrison's interruption was gentle but firm. "But trauma doesn't automatically mean a child is suffering in their current environment. Lucas talks about Ms. Carter constantly. She's at every parent-teacher conference, every school event. She volunteers in the library, even though I know she works nights. When we had concerns about Lucas struggling with grief counseling, she arranged for sessions even though her insurance didn't fully cover it. That's not instability, Mrs. Crowhurst. That's someone doing everything humanly possible with the resources available. But what if better resources were available? Evelyn leaned forward, trying to find purchase in the conversation. What if Lucas could attend schools with smaller class sizes, specialized programs, opportunities that his current situation simply can't provide? Mrs. Morrison set down her teacup with enough force that it clicked against the saucer. Mrs. Crowhurst, I've been in education long enough to see every version of this conversation. Parents who think the right school will fix their child's problems. Wealthy benefactors who think money can substitute for presence. And I've learned something that might surprise you. Children don't thrive because of opportunities. They thrive because someone shows up for them, consistently and unconditionally, day after day after day. Surely you're not suggesting that poverty is preferable to... I'm suggesting that ripping a child away from a loving home because someone wealthier thinks they can do better is trauma all on its own. Mrs. Morrison's voice hardened. Lucas has already lost his mother. Now you want him to lose the woman who's been there for him through the worst period of his life? For what? So he can have a bigger bedroom and a better zip code? The accusation hung in the air between them, sharp enough that Evelyn felt it like a physical blow. She'd come here expecting concerns about Nia's limitations, documentation of missed opportunities, anything that would support the narrative Richard was building in court. Instead, she'd found a defender who saw through the careful framing to the raw truth beneath. I loved my son, Evelyn said quietly, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. And Lucas is all I have left of him. Is it so wrong to want to be part of his life? To want to give him everything Daniel would have wanted for him? Mrs. Morrison's expression softened slightly. There's nothing wrong with wanting a relationship with your grandson. But Mrs. Crowhurst, you didn't come here to build a relationship. You came here looking for ammunition to take him away from someone who loves him. Those are very different things. She stood, leaving her tea barely touched. Lucas is a remarkable child. He's kind, resilient, and despite everything he's been through, he still believes the world is fundamentally good. That's because of Nia Carter. That's because someone has been protecting him, nurturing him, showing him what unconditional love looks like. She pulled out a business card and placed it on the table. If you genuinely want to be part of his life, talk to Ms. Carter. Work something out that doesn't involve lawyers and custody battles and traumatizing a 7-year-old boy. But if you're here to build a case for why she's inadequate, you'll find no help from me. Mrs. Morrison left, and Evelyn sat alone with her cooling coffee and the uncomfortable realization that this fight was more complicated than she'd allowed herself to believe. She'd framed this as rescue, saving Lucas from poverty, from limitation, from a life smaller than what his bloodline deserved. But what if she was wrong? What if she was the one creating trauma? She pushed the thought away. Emotions were luxuries in business, and this was business now whether she wanted to admit it or not. Richard needed to know that the school wouldn't be a source of supportive testimony. They'd have to look elsewhere. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Webb, her head of security. The message was brief but weighted with implication. Found something. Need to meet ASAP. Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. This was what she'd been waiting for. The piece of information that would shift the narrative, that would prove Nia Carter wasn't the saint she presented herself to be. She texted back to meet at her office in an hour, then sat in the coffee shop for a few more minutes, trying to shake off the conversation with Mrs. Morrison. But the principal's words stayed with her, particularly one phrase that kept circling back. You didn't come here to build a relationship. You came here looking for ammunition. Was that true? When had this stopped being about Lucas and started being about winning? Evelyn didn't let herself answer that question. Some truths were too expensive to acknowledge. Marcus arrived at her penthouse office with a folder that looked thin enough to be disappointing, but his expression suggested otherwise. The careful neutrality of someone who'd found exactly what they'd been hired to find, even if they weren't certain how their employer would receive it. Tell me you have something, Evelyn said without preamble. Marcus opened the folder and pulled out a series of photographs. Nia Carter has been meeting regularly with someone we couldn't initially identify. Private meetings, always at locations away from her apartment or workplace. We finally got confirmation on who it is. He slid a photo across the desk. The image showed Nia sitting across from a woman in what looked like a law office. The quality was good enough that Evelyn could see the intensity in both women's expressions, the spread of documents on the table between them. "That's Rebecca Santos," Marcus continued. "She runs the Civil Rights Legal Defense Center. They specialize in cases involving systemic inequality, wrongful prosecution, and," he paused meaningfully, "custody battles where they believe wealth is being weaponized against vulnerable populations." Evelyn studied the photo, her mind already working through implications. "So she has representation. That's not exactly shocking news, Marcus." "It's not just representation. Santos has a reputation for turning these cases into public crusades. She's been involved in 3 high-profile custody disputes in the last 5 years, and in each one, she's managed to paint the wealthier party as a predator trying to buy children. 2 of those cases resulted in massive settlements to avoid trial. The 3rd went to court, and the biological family lost." "Lost?" The word came out sharper than Evelyn intended. "Completely. The judge ruled that wealth alone didn't constitute superior parenting, and that removing a child from a stable, loving environment would cause more harm than the financial limitations ever could. It set a precedent that Santos has been building on ever since." Marcus pulled out another document. "I also found this. Santos is connected to a network of pro bono attorneys, child welfare experts, and journalists who specialize in covering cases like this. If we're not careful, this becomes a media circus that we can't control." Evelyn felt the first stirrings of real concern. She'd assumed Nia would struggle to find adequate representation, that the financial burden alone would force her into a corner where settlement became the only option. But Santos changed that calculation. This wasn't just about Nia anymore. This was about an organization that had built its reputation on defeating exactly the kind of case Evelyn was pursuing. "What else?" she asked, knowing from Marcus's expression that there was more. "Santos filed a motion this morning requesting complete disclosure of your financial dealings with anyone connected to Lucas or his mother. She's specifically asking for records of any payments made to Maya Richardson or her associates during her relationship with your son." The implication hit Evelyn like ice water. "She thinks I paid Maya to stay away." "Did you?" "No." The answer was immediate and honest. "I didn't even know Maya existed until after Daniel died, but—" She stopped, remembering something from years ago, a conversation she'd only half listened to because it hadn't seemed important at the time. Daniel had mentioned a woman once, someone he'd met through his volunteer work. He'd been vague about details but passionate about her intelligence, her commitment to helping people, her refusal to be impressed by the Crowhurst name. Evelyn had made some dismissive comment about charity work being a distraction from real responsibilities, and Daniel had gotten quiet in that way he did when she'd disappointed him. The next time they'd discussed his schedule, the volunteer work had stopped appearing on his calendar. "But what?" Marcus prompted. "But I made it clear that his time was better spent elsewhere, that relationships with people outside our circle were complicated, that mixing personal and philanthropic activities was inappropriate." Evelyn's voice had gone flat. "I didn't explicitly tell him to end things with anyone, but I didn't have to be explicit. Daniel knew what I expected." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his professional discretion warring with something that looked almost like sympathy. "Mrs. Crowhurst, if Santos can establish a pattern of you interfering in your son's relationships, if she can show that your actions contributed to Maya's decision to keep Lucas a secret, then she makes me the villain in this story, instead of the grieving grandmother trying to help." Evelyn finished his thought with bitter clarity. "She turns this into a referendum on whether I deserve access to Lucas at all." "Exactly." Marcus closed the folder. "There's something else you should know. Santos has also filed for a guardian ad litem to be appointed for Lucas, someone whose only job is to represent his interests, separate from either you or Ms. Carter. That person will interview him, observe his home environment, and make recommendations to the court about what's actually best for him rather than what either party wants." Evelyn moved to the window, the city spread out below her like a game board she'd always known how to play. Except the pieces were moving in ways she hadn't anticipated, and the rules she'd relied on suddenly felt inadequate. "What do you recommend?" she asked without turning around. Honestly, I recommend you talk to Ms. Carter again. Not through lawyers, not with threats or offers of money. Just talk to her. See if there's a way to share custody, to be part of Lucas's life without destroying the life he already has. She refused that option. You didn't offer it. Marcus's voice was gentle but uncompromising. You offered to take custody and let her visit. That's not sharing, that's conquering with a courtesy clause. The words stung because they were true. Evelyn had approached this the way she approached every negotiation. Identify what you want, calculate the cost, and pay it. But Lucas wasn't a company to be acquired or a problem to be solved with the right application of resources. He was a child who'd already lost too much. Set up another meeting, she said finally, with Ms. Carter. No lawyers this time, just her and me. Mrs. Crowhurst, are you sure that's wise? Anything you say could be, I don't care. Evelyn turned from the window. I need to look her in the eye and understand who she really is. Not the saint the media is painting her as, and not the inadequate guardian my lawyers claim. Just the woman who's been raising my grandson. Can you arrange that? Marcus nodded slowly. I'll reach out to her attorney, see if she's willing. After he left, Evelyn sat alone in her office and did something she hadn't done since Daniel's funeral. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through old photos of her son, birthday parties and graduations and family dinners that felt like they'd happened to someone else. In every picture, Daniel looked polished, professional, exactly what a Crowhurst heir should be. But there was one photo, buried deep in her camera roll, that was different. Daniel at maybe 25, laughing with his head thrown back, wearing jeans and a t-shirt she'd definitely commented on disapprovingly. He looked young and happy and free of the weight she'd spent his whole life placing on his shoulders. She zoomed in on his eyes, the same storm gray that she'd seen in Lucas's face at the cemetery, and felt something crack in the careful armor she'd built around her grief. What if the life she'd tried to give Daniel hadn't been what he wanted? What if all her pushing and planning and protecting had driven him away from the things that made him happy? And what if she was about to make the same mistake with Lucas, destroying the happiness he had in pursuit of the life she thought he should want? Evelyn didn't let herself cry. She never let herself cry. But she sat there for a long time, staring at her son's smile and wondering when she'd started confusing love with control. Nia received the meeting request through Rebecca, who called her at the diner during her dinner rush and suggested they talk immediately. She wants to meet again, Rebecca said without preamble when Nia called back from the parking lot. Just the two of you, no lawyers, no recordings, off the record. Nia's first instinct was to refuse. Every interaction with Evelyn Crowhurst had left her feeling dissected, evaluated, and found wanting. The idea of facing her again without Rebecca's guidance felt like stepping into a cage with something that smiled with too many teeth. Why would I agree to that? Because something changed. Rebecca's voice carried a note of curiosity. Marcus Webb, that's her head of security, he called my office directly instead of going through her lawyers. He said Mrs. Crowhurst wants to have a conversation about Lucas that isn't filtered through legal strategy. That could be a trap, or it could be an opening. Either way, I think you should take it. You think I should meet with the woman who's trying to take Lucas from me? Alone? I think you should find out if the woman who's trying to take Lucas from you might be having second thoughts. Rebecca paused. Look, Nia, I've been doing this long enough to recognize when someone's facade is cracking. The school wouldn't give her what she wanted. The guardian ad litem we requested is going to expose Lucas to scrutiny she probably didn't anticipate. And the public opinion isn't swinging her way as decisively as she expected. She's realizing this might be a fight she can't win the way she usually wins things. So she's looking for an exit strategy. Or she's looking for a different kind of victory. One where she gets to be part of Lucas's life without destroying yours. Rebecca's voice softened. I can't tell you what to do, but if there's even a chance this could end without a trial, without Lucas having to testify about which of you he wants to live with, isn't it worth the risk? Nia thought about Lucas at breakfast that morning, asking why his picture kept appearing in the newspaper. Thought about the way he'd started having nightmares again, the regression to bedwetting they'd worked so hard to overcome after Maya died. Thought about the guardian ad litem who would soon be interviewing him, asking questions no 7-year-old should have to answer about who he loved more. Okay, she said, I'll meet with her, But Rebecca, if this goes wrong, if she uses anything I say against me, then we fight back harder than before. But Naya, go into this with an open mind, not naive, not trusting, but open to the possibility that people can surprise you, even billionaires with armies of lawyers. But the meeting was set for the following evening at a location that surprised Nia, not Evelyn's office or another anonymous coffee shop, but a small park near the cemetery where this had all started. Marcus Webb had chosen it, explaining to Rebecca that Mrs. Crowhurst wanted somewhere both public enough to feel safe and private enough for honest conversation. Nia arrived first, her shift at the diner finished, but her grocery store shift not yet started. She had exactly 90 minutes, and she dressed carefully in the closest thing she owned to business casual, slacks she'd bought for Maya's funeral, and a sweater that didn't have any visible mending. Evelyn appeared 10 minutes later, driven by Marcus but arriving alone. She wore jeans, expensive jeans that probably cost more than Nia's monthly grocery budget, but jeans nonetheless, and a simple black coat. Without the armor of her designer suits and boardroom confidence, she looked smaller, older. Human in a way Nia hadn't expected. They sat on a bench overlooking the pond where ducks paddled in the fading light. For a long moment, neither spoke, both seemingly uncertain how to begin a conversation that had never gone well before. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. "I met with Lucas's principal last week." Nia felt her shoulders tense. "I know, Mrs. Morrison told me. She thinks very highly of you." Evelyn's voice carried something that might have been respect or might have been resentment. Nia couldn't quite tell. "She told me that Lucas is thriving, that you're doing everything right despite circumstances that would break most people." "Did that change your mind about the custody case?" "It complicated my certainty." Evelyn turned to look at Nia directly for the first time. "I came into this believing I was rescuing Lucas from an inadequate situation, that my grandson was suffering because you couldn't provide what I could, but that's not what I'm finding. What I'm finding is that he's happy, he's healthy, and he loves you." "Then drop the case." Nia heard the desperation creep into her voice and didn't try to hide it. "If you really understand that, if you really see what taking him from me would do to him, then just stop. Let him have the stability he needs. Let him heal from losing Maya without losing me too." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment, her gaze on the ducks. "Can I ask you something? Why did Maya keep Lucas a secret from Daniel? Not from me, I understand that part. But why keep a father from his child?" The question landed in territory Nia had hoped to avoid, but she'd promised Rebecca complete honesty. "Because your son was changing. Maya said when they first met he was passionate about the foundation, about making a real difference. But the longer they were together, the more she watched him pull away from that. He'd get calls from you about board meetings or business opportunities, and she could see him," Nia searched for the right word, "hardening, becoming someone who saw every interaction as transactional. She was afraid that if he knew about Lucas, he'd do the math and decide a child was either an asset or a liability. She wanted to protect Lucas from being evaluated like a business decision. She was afraid Daniel would become me." The words came out flat, stripped of defensiveness. She was afraid the life you wanted for him would leave no room for the life he was trying to build with her. And she was right, wasn't she? You told him the volunteer work was a waste of time. He stopped showing up. He stopped calling her. She realized that your approval mattered more to him than his own happiness, and she didn't want Lucas growing up in that shadow. Evelyn flinched as if she'd been slapped. "I thought I was preparing him for the responsibilities he'd inherit. I thought I was protecting him from wasting his potential on—" She stopped, seeming to hear her own words. "On things I didn't value, people I didn't think were worth his time. Like Maya. Like anyone who might ask him to choose between love and legacy." Evelyn's voice had gone quiet. "I built an empire, Ms. Carter. I spent 40 years in rooms where being soft meant losing, where showing vulnerability was invitation for attack. I taught Daniel to navigate that world because I thought it was the only world that mattered. And now he's dead, and the woman he loved is dead. And their son exists because they found something I didn't teach him to value." "Love," Nia said the word gently. "Love." Evelyn repeated it like she was testing the weight of something foreign. "Do you know what haunts me? Not just that I didn't know about Lucas, but that if Daniel had told me, I would have reacted exactly the way Maya feared. I would have seen his son as a complication, a potential scandal, something to be managed rather than celebrated. She was right not to trust me with that knowledge. They sat in silence for a moment, the truth of Evelyn's admission settling between them like something too heavy to move. "So what do you want?" Naya finally asked. "If not to take Lucas from me, then what?" Evelyn turned to face her fully. "I want to know my grandson. I want him to know that his father existed, that he came from a legacy that's more than just money. I want to be part of his life in whatever way doesn't destroy the life you've built for him." She paused. "I'm asking for what I should have asked for at the beginning. Not custody, not control, just a chance to be his grandmother." Nia felt something shift in her chest. Not trust exactly, but the possibility of it. "What about the custody case?" "I'll have Richard file for withdrawal tomorrow. Complete, unconditional withdrawal." Evelyn's voice was steady. "In exchange, I'm asking for visitation. Supervised at first if you want, gradually building to whatever feels right for Lucas. I'm asking to be allowed to contribute to his education, his health care, the things that I can help with financially without trying to take over. And I'm asking," her voice cracked slightly, "for the chance to show you that I can be different than I was, that I can learn to value what matters instead of what costs." Nia studied Evelyn's face, looking for signs of manipulation or strategy, but all she saw was a woman who looked tired and grieving and honestly uncertain whether she'd be given the second chance she was asking for. "I need to talk to Rebecca," Nia said slowly. "I need legal protection that you won't change your mind in 6 months and try this again. I need it in writing that Lucas stays with me, that I remain his legal guardian, and that your role in his life is based on his well-being, not your convenience." "Whatever you need," Evelyn's response was immediate. "Whatever protections make you feel safe, I'll sign them. And I need time to prepare Lucas for the fact that he has a grandmother who wants to meet him. Time to make sure this is really what you want and not just a strategic retreat until you find better ammunition." "How much time?" Nia thought about Lucas, about the questions he'd been asking about family, about whether he had other relatives besides her. 2 weeks. Let Rebecca and your lawyers work out an agreement that protects everyone. Let the guardian ad litem finish their evaluation so we have an objective opinion on what's best for him. And then, if everything checks out, we can start introducing you into his life. Slowly, carefully, in ways that don't overwhelm him." Evelyn nodded, and Nia saw tears in her eyes for the first time. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve this chance, but thank you for giving it to me anyway." They sat on that bench as the sun set over the pond, two women who'd started as adversaries beginning the complicated work of becoming something else. Not friends. That would take time and trust neither of them had yet, but perhaps allies in the shared project of protecting a little boy who'd already lost too much. When Nia finally stood to leave for her night shift, Evelyn stood too. "Ms. Carter, Nia, can I ask you one more thing?" "What?" "The drawing Lucas made. The one with the 3 stick figures. Do you still have it?" Nia pulled out her phone and showed Evelyn a photo she'd taken of it before putting the original in Lucas's memory box. Evelyn stared at the image of the 3 figures holding hands, the grandmother with the question mark finally being answered. "He's been waiting for you," Nia said softly. "Not the billionaire or the Crowhurst heir, just his grandmother. The question is whether that's who you're ready to be." Evelyn looked up from the phone, meeting Nia's eyes with an expression that held equal parts hope and fear. "I don't know how to be just a grandmother, but I'd like to learn. If you'll teach me." Nia felt something loosen in her chest, the constant vigilance she'd maintained since the cemetery finally easing just slightly. "We'll figure it out together," she said. "For Lucas." "For Lucas," Evelyn repeated, and for the first time since they'd met, the words felt like a promise instead of a threat. But promises made in moments of clarity had a way of colliding with reality, and the collision came faster than either woman expected. 3 days after their conversation in the park, Nia's phone rang at 2 in the morning. She jerked awake from the thin sleep she'd managed between shifts, heart already pounding with the particular terror that came from midnight calls when you had a child to protect. Rebecca's voice on the other end was tight with controlled fury. Are you watching the news? I was sleeping. What's happening? Turn on Channel 7, now. Nia fumbled for the remote, keeping her voice low so she wouldn't wake Lucas in the next room. The television flickered to life on a breaking news banner that made her stomach drop. Crowhurst custody battle takes shocking turn. New evidence emerges. The anchor's face was professionally sympathetic as she delivered the story. Sources close to this Crowhurst family have provided the station with documents suggesting that Nia Carter, the woman at the center of the custody dispute over 7-year-old Lucas Richardson, may have misrepresented her relationship with the child's late mother, Maya Richardson. Hospital records obtained by our investigative team show that Ms. Carter was not present during the final weeks of Ms. Richardson's life, raising questions about her claims of being entrusted with Lucas's care. The screen filled with what appeared to be official documents, dates, and signatures highlighted in yellow. Nia recognized them. The discharge papers from when Maya had briefly been sent home for hospice care, the readmission forms when the pain became unmanageable. She hadn't been there for those signatures because she'd been at Lucas's school play, the one Maya had begged her to attend because someone needed to see their boy dressed as a tree in the class production. This is a lie, Nia breathed into the phone. Rebecca, those documents don't show what they're claiming. I was there. I was there every single day, except when Maya specifically asked me to be somewhere else with Lucas. I know. Rebecca's voice was hard as stone. This is a hit job. Someone leaked cherry-picked documents designed to make you look like you've been lying about your relationship with Maya. And I'll give you one guess who benefits from that narrative. Evelyn. The name came out bitter. She played me. The whole conversation in the park, the promise to withdraw the custody case, it was all strategy. Keep me calm while she prepared the next attack. We don't know that for certain, don't we? Nia was pacing now, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay quiet. 2 days ago, she's crying about wanting to learn to be a grandmother, and now hospital records are mysteriously leaked to the media? Records that her investigator Marcus Webb probably had access to? Rebecca was silent for a moment, and Nia could hear papers shuffling in the background. I've already sent a cease and desist to the news station. We'll demand a retraction, and we'll file a motion with the court about evidence tampering. But, Nia, I have to ask you directly, is there any truth to what they're claiming? Any period where you weren't as present as you've stated? The question felt like betrayal, even though Nia understood why it had to be asked. There were times when I couldn't be in 2 places at once. When Maya was dying and Lucas needed someone to take him to school and birthday parties and all the things that reminded him life continued. Maya and I made choices about who needed me more in any given moment. But I never abandoned her. Her voice cracked. I held her hand when she died. I was the last person she spoke to. How dare they suggest I wasn't there? Then we fight back with the truth. I need you to pull together everything you have, photos from that time period, text messages between you and Maya, anything that shows the full picture instead of the selective narrative they're building. Rebecca paused. And Nia? Don't contact Evelyn Crowhurst. Not a call, not a text, nothing. If she did orchestrate this, anything you say to her will be used against you. If she didn't, she needs to prove that through actions, not words. After the call ended, Nia stood in her dark living room and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd allowed herself to hope. She'd started to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could end without destroying everyone involved. And now that hope felt like the cruelest trick of all. She checked on Lucas, found him still sleeping with his stuffed cat clutched to his chest, blissfully unaware that his life had just become a media spectacle again. Then she went to the small desk where she kept Maya's things, the letters, the photos, the documentation of a friendship that had been the most important relationship in both their lives. If Evelyn wanted war, Nia would give it to her. But this time, she wouldn't fight with lawyers and strategies. She'd fight with the truth, laid bare for everyone to see. Across the city, Evelyn Crowhurst was having her own midnight awakening, though hers came not from a phone call but from Marcus Webb standing in her living room after her security system alerted her to his arrival. What the hell were you thinking? His voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the anger beneath it. We had an agreement. You were withdrawing from the custody case, building toward a relationship with Lucas instead of a war with his guardian. And then this... He threw a tablet onto her coffee table, the news broadcast frozen on Nia Carter's face, looking stricken and betrayed. Evelyn stared at the screen, her mind racing through possibilities. I didn't authorize this. I specifically told Richard to begin drafting withdrawal papers. Then who leaked the hospital records? Who fed this story to Channel 7 with enough detail to make it sound credible? Marcus's professional distance had evaporated entirely. Because someone with access to the investigation I conducted decided to weaponize it, and that order came from somewhere in your orbit. Richard. The name came to her with cold certainty. He's been pushing back on the withdrawal, saying it made us look weak, saying we should at least maintain leverage until any visitation agreement was finalized. She reached for her phone, but Marcus stopped her. It's too late for damage control. The story is out. Nia Carter thinks you played her, and frankly, I don't blame her. That conversation in the park, where you cried and talked about learning to be different, you just destroyed any credibility that bought you. I meant what I said. Evelyn's voice rose with a defensiveness that surprised her. I was ready to do this differently, to build something real instead of just taking what I wanted. Then prove it. Marcus's challenge was blunt. Fire Richard Chen, publicly. Make a statement that this leak was unauthorized and doesn't represent your position. Issue an apology to Ms. Carter and follow through on withdrawing the custody case immediately, not in 2 weeks when lawyers finish posturing. Show everyone that you're willing to sacrifice your own interests to do right by Lucas. If I fire Richard, I lose the best family law attorney in the state. You'll lose a lot more than that if you don't. Marcus moved toward the door, then turned back. Mrs. Crowhurst, I've worked for your family for 15 years. I've watched you navigate hostile takeovers and corporate warfare in situations that would break most people. But this isn't business. This is a little boy who deserves better than being the prize in a fight between adults who can't figure out how to put him first. Figure out what matters more, winning or being someone Lucas can actually love when this is over. He left, and Evelyn sat alone in her penthouse with the news broadcast playing on loop and the crushing realization that she'd just destroyed the one chance she'd had to get this right. By morning, the story had metastasized across every news outlet and social media platform. The narrative had shifted from Billionaire versus Waitress to Con Artist Exposed, with commentators dissecting every claim Nia had made about her relationship with Maya. The photos of Nia at Maya's bedside, the documentation of her presence throughout the illness, none of it mattered against the simple, damning fact that official hospital records showed gaps in her visits. Nia called in sick to both jobs for the first time in 3 years. She couldn't face customers who'd seen the news, couldn't paste on the service smile when everything felt like it was crumbling. Instead, she stayed home with Lucas, who'd started asking questions she didn't know how to answer. The kids at school said you're a liar, he told her over breakfast, his voice small and confused. They said you made up stories about my mom to try to keep me. Nia knelt down in front of his chair, taking his hands in hers. Baby, I have never lied to you about your mom. She was my best friend in the whole world, and taking care of you is the most important thing she ever asked me to do. There are people who want to make that sound bad, who want to make it seem like I wasn't there for her, but that's not true. Then why are they saying it? How did you explain adult cruelty to a 7-year-old? How did you tell him that his grandmother, the woman he'd been cautiously excited to meet, might be behind the campaign to discredit the only mother figure he had left? Sometimes people tell part of the truth in a way that makes it sound like a lie, Nia said carefully. Yes, there were times I wasn't at the hospital with your mom, but do you know where I was instead? Lucas shook his head. I was with you at your school play when you were a tree, at Tyler's birthday party when your mom knew you needed to be a normal kid for a day. At the park when she asked me to take you somewhere you could be loud and silly because the hospital was so quiet and sad. Nia felt tears threatening but held them back. Your mom and I made choices together about how to take care of you while she was sick, and every choice we made was about protecting you. I don't want you to go away. His voice broke on the words. Everyone keeps going away, and I want you to stay. Nia pulled him into her arms, holding him tight while he cried. I'm not going anywhere, baby. I promise you. No matter what anyone says or what happens in court, I'm staying right here with you. It was a promise she desperately wanted to keep but wasn't certain she could guarantee. Not anymore. Rebecca called an emergency meeting that afternoon at her office. When Nia arrived, she found not just Rebecca, but 3 other attorneys she didn't recognize, all looking grim. "We need to go nuclear," Rebecca said without preamble. "The hospital records leak was designed to destroy your credibility before we could establish the full narrative. So we're going to establish it now, all at once, in a way they can't counter." "How?" One of the other attorneys, a man introduced as James Park, who specialized in media strategy, leaned forward. "We're going to release everything. Every text message between you and Maya, every photo from the hospital, the letters she wrote to Lucas that you've been keeping for him, her will, which explicitly names you as guardian and explains why. We're going to show the world exactly who Maya Richardson was and what she wanted for her son." Nia felt her chest tighten. "Those letters are private. They're for Lucas, for when he's older, and they'll still be for him," Rebecca interrupted gently. "But right now, they're also evidence. Evidence that Maya trusted you completely. Evidence that this wasn't some opportunistic grab, but a dying woman's explicit wishes being honored. We'll redact anything too personal, anything that doesn't serve the legal case. But Nia, we need to show that Maya chose you deliberately, knowing exactly what she was doing." "There's something else," another attorney added, a woman named Sarah Chen, who looked barely 30 but had the confidence of someone who'd won cases that mattered. "We've been investigating the leak. The hospital records that went to Channel 7 were accessed through a legal records request filed by Chen and Associates, Richard Chen's firm. We can prove the leak came from Evelyn Crowhurst's legal team." "Can we prove she authorized it?" Nia asked. "Not definitively. She could claim it was done without her knowledge, but the optics are bad for her regardless." Sarah slid a document across the table. "We're filing a formal complaint with the State Bar Association for improper release of confidential medical records. We're also filing a motion to have the entire custody case dismissed with prejudice based on bad faith conduct by the petitioner." Nia stared at the document, understanding what it meant. This wasn't just fighting back. This was going for complete victory, for destroying any chance Evelyn Crowhurst would ever have of being part of Lucas's life. "If we do this," she said slowly, "we're burning every bridge. There's no path back to the conversation we had in the park. No possibility of Lucas having a relationship with his grandmother." "Is that possibility still on the table?" Rebecca's question was pointed. "After she or her lawyers tried to destroy you publicly?" Nia thought about Evelyn's tears on that park bench, about the vulnerability in her voice when she'd admitted she didn't know how to be just a grandmother, about the question mark in Lucas's drawing, still waiting to be answered. "What if she didn't know?" Nia heard herself say. "What if this really was her lawyer going rogue, trying to maintain leverage the way lawyers do?" "Then she needs to prove it," James said flatly. "She needs to publicly disavow the leak, fire the attorney responsible, and withdraw the custody case immediately. Not in 2 weeks. Not when convenient. Today." Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and something in her expression shifted. "We may get that chance sooner than expected. Evelyn Crowhurst's office just requested an emergency meeting. In person. This afternoon, if possible." The meeting was arranged for 3 p.m. at Rebecca's office, neutral ground where both parties could have their attorneys present, but where the power dynamics were different than they'd been in Evelyn's boardroom or Richard's legal fortress. Evelyn arrived exactly on time, but she arrived alone. No Richard Chen, no Marcus Webb, no phalanx of attorneys. Just a woman in her 60s carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression Nia had never seen before, something that looked almost like shame. Rebecca directed them to a conference room, and the attorneys filed in with professional wariness. Nia sat across from Evelyn, separated by a table that felt like a demilitarized zone. "Thank you for seeing me," Evelyn began, and her voice was hoarse as if she'd been crying. "I know I have no right to ask for your time after what happened, but I needed to say this in person." "We're listening," Rebecca said, her tone neutral but watchful. Evelyn opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "These are the immediate withdrawal papers for the custody case. Unconditional, permanent, with prejudice. I'm abandoning any legal claim to guardianship or custody of Lucas Richardson." She slid them across the table. Rebecca picked them up, scanning quickly. James and Sarah leaned in to review them as well, their professional skepticism looking for loopholes or contingencies. They're legitimate, Sarah said after a moment. Complete withdrawal. She's even agreeing to pay your legal fees incurred during the case. I'm also terminating my relationship with Chen and Associates, Evelyn continued. Richard has been officially fired, and I've filed a complaint with the Bar Association about the unauthorized leak of medical records. I've given a statement to Channel 7 retracting their story and threatening legal action if they don't issue a full correction and apology. She pulled out more documents. These are the communications proving I didn't authorize the leak. I'm making them available to you and, if necessary, to the court. Nia studied Evelyn's face, looking for signs of strategy or manipulation, but all she saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. Why should we believe this isn't just another tactic? Nia asked quietly. Another way to get me to lower my guard so you can attack from a different angle. Because I've lost everything that matters in the pursuit of tactics. Evelyn's voice cracked. My husband died building an empire. My son died trying to escape it. And I almost lost any chance of knowing my grandson because I couldn't stop treating human beings like acquisitions. She looked directly at Nia. You asked me in the park if I was ready to be just a grandmother. The answer then was that I didn't know how. The answer now is that I might never get the chance to learn, and that's no one's fault but mine. So what are you asking for? Rebecca interjected. Nothing. The word seemed to surprise Evelyn as much as it surprised everyone else in the room. I'm not asking for visitation rights or scheduled time or any legal framework that gives me leverage. I'm asking, she turned back to Nia. If someday, when Lucas is ready, when you're ready, you might let me know him, not as an heir or a Crowhurst, just as his grandmother. And if that day never comes, I'll accept that as the consequence of my choices. The room was silent. Nia felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her, the awareness that what she said next would shape Lucas's entire understanding of family, of forgiveness, of what adults did when they made terrible mistakes. I need to think about it, she said finally. I need to talk to the guardian ad litem. I need to make sure that whatever relationship develops happens on terms that protect Lucas, not terms that make adults feel better about themselves. I understand. Evelyn stood, and Nia saw that her hands were shaking. I've also established a trust fund for Lucas. Irrevocable, managed by an independent trustee, accessible for his education and healthcare needs. You maintain complete control over how and when it's used. The documentation is in the briefcase. It's not a bribe or a condition of anything. It's just, she stopped, searching for words, what his father would have wanted him to have. After Evelyn left, the attorneys huddled around the documents like doctors examining x-rays for hidden fractures. Everything appeared legitimate. The withdrawal was complete. The trust was structured exactly as Evelyn had described. The communications proved Richard Chen had acted without explicit authorization. She nuked her own legal team, James said with something like admiration. Richard Chen is one of the most powerful family law attorneys in the state, and she burned that bridge completely. That's not strategy. That's someone making a choice to lose rather than win the wrong way. Or it's someone who realized they were about to lose anyway and decided to control the narrative of their defeat, Sarah countered. We should proceed as if this could still be a trap. But Rebecca was looking at Nia with an expression that suggested she saw something else entirely. What do you want to do? Nia thought about Lucas asking why people kept going away. Thought about Maya making her promise to protect him from being used, from being seen as anything other than a child who deserved love. Thought about the question mark in his drawing and the fact that Evelyn Crowhurst had just dismantled her own power to try to answer it differently. I want to meet with the guardian ad litem, Nia said. I want their assessment of what's actually best for Lucas, separate from what I want or what Evelyn wants. And then, she paused, feeling the weight of what she was about to say. Then I want to try. Not because I trust her completely. Not because I've forgotten what she tried to do, but because Lucas deserves the chance to know his family, and I refuse to be the person who keeps that from him out of spite. Rebecca nodded slowly. We'll set it up. But Nia, we do this with protections in place. Legal agreements about boundaries, psychological evaluations to make sure Evelyn is genuinely committed to being a healthy family and not just playing a long game. We protect Lucas first, reconciliation second. Always, Naya agreed. The Guardian ad litem's report arrived 2 weeks later. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo had spent hours with Lucas, with Nia, and at Nia's invitation, with Evelyn. Her conclusions were detailed and nuanced, but certain phrases stood out with the clarity of professional observation. Lucas Richardson is a well-adjusted child who has experienced significant loss but has been provided with consistent, loving care that has allowed him to process grief in healthy ways. His attachment to Ms. Carter is secure and should not be disrupted. However, Lucas has also expressed curiosity about his extended family and particularly about his grandmother. Supervised visitation, gradually increased based on Lucas's comfort level, would likely benefit his sense of identity and family connection without compromising his primary attachment. The report recommended a careful integration plan, monthly supervised visits initially, gradually increasing to unsupervised time if the relationship developed positively. It emphasized that Lucas should never be put in the position of choosing between caregivers, and that Evelyn's role should be clearly defined as supplementary to, not competitive with, Nia's guardianship. Dr. Okonkwo scheduled a meeting with both women to discuss implementation. They met in her office, a space designed to feel non-threatening with comfortable furniture and artwork that suggested calm professionalism. "I want to be clear about something," Dr. Okonkwo began, looking between Naya and Evelyn with the steady gaze of someone who'd seen every version of family dysfunction. "This is not about giving either of you what you want. This is about giving Lucas what he needs. And what he needs is adults who can put aside their conflict long enough to show him what healthy relationships look like." "I understand," Evelyn said quietly. "Do you?" Dr. Okonkwo's challenge was gentle but firm. Because understanding intellectually and practicing emotionally are different things. Lucas doesn't need a grandmother who competes with his guardian. He doesn't need expensive gifts that make his everyday life feel inadequate. He doesn't need to be pulled between two worlds or made to feel guilty about loving either of you. "What does he need?" Evelyn asked. "He needs consistency. He needs you to show up when you say you will and respect boundaries when they're set. He needs you to value his happiness over your desire for closeness. And most importantly," Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward, "he needs you to support his relationship with Ms. Carter, even when it's hard. Even when he runs to her first. Even when you realize that you'll never be his primary attachment, and you have to be okay with being secondary." Nia watched Evelyn process those words, saw something painful work its way across her features. This was the cost of reconciliation, not just admitting past mistakes, but accepting permanent limitations on what could be reclaimed. "I can do that," Evelyn said finally. "I have to believe I can learn to do that." Dr. Okonkwo turned to Nia. "And you need to genuinely give this a chance. Not go through the motions while waiting for her to fail. Not use Lucas as a weapon to punish her for past harm. You need to model forgiveness, even when it feels unearned." "That's asking a lot," Nia said, hearing the defensiveness in her own voice. "It is. But you're the one with power now. You get to decide if Lucas has a grandmother or if that question mark in his drawing stays unanswered forever. That's a responsibility, not just a right." The truth of it settled over Nia like weight. She'd spent months fighting to protect Lucas from being taken. Now she had to fight her own instinct to protect him from any risk at all, including the risk of letting someone flawed and complicated into his life. "When do we start?" she asked. Dr. Okonkwo smiled. "How about next Saturday? Something simple and short. Maybe the park where you two first talked? Give Lucas a chance to meet his grandmother in a space that feels safe to him." Evelyn looked at Nia, waiting for confirmation. In that moment, Nia saw not the billionaire who'd tried to take her child, but a grandmother who desperately wanted a second chance and wasn't sure she deserved one. "Saturday works," Nia said. 2 p.m., 1 hour. And Evelyn? Come as a grandmother, not a Crowhurst, just a woman who wants to know her grandson. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. "Thank you. I'll be there." Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that felt designed for new beginnings. Cool enough for sweaters, warm enough that the playground wouldn't be deserted. Nia had spent the morning preparing Lucas, trying to explain in 7-year-old terms that his grandmother wanted to meet him and that this was a good thing, a hopeful thing, even though the adults had made it complicated. "Will she like me?" Lucas asked as Nia helped him into his jacket, the question so achingly vulnerable that it made her chest hurt. Baby, she already loves you. She loved you before she even met you just because you're you. Nia knelt down to zip his coat, meeting his eyes. But remember what we talked about? This is just a visit, just getting to know each other. No one's going anywhere. Nothing's changing at home, okay? Okay. But his hand found hers and held tight as they walked to the park. And Nia understood that reassurance would need to be given over and over, proven through consistency rather than promised through words. Evelyn was already there when they arrived, sitting on the same bench where she and Nia had brokered their fragile peace. She'd dressed down again, jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back without the usual professional styling. She looked nervous in a way Nia had never seen before, hands clasped in her lap, posture suggesting she might bolt at any moment. When she saw them approaching, she stood, and Nia watched her face transform with an emotion so raw it was almost painful to witness. Love and grief and hope all mixed together in an expression that said more than any rehearsed greeting could. "Lucas," Evelyn said softly, staying where she was rather than rushing forward. "I'm so glad to meet you." Lucas pressed closer to Nia's side, suddenly shy in a way he usually wasn't. "You're my grandma?" "I am." Evelyn's voice wavered slightly. "Your daddy was my son. His name was Daniel." "I know. Aunt Nia told me." Lucas studied her with the frank assessment children bring to new people. "You have his eyes. That's what everyone says about me, too." Evelyn's hand went to her mouth, emotion clearly overwhelming her ability to respond. Nia stepped in gently, recognizing the moment needed rescuing. "Why don't we sit down? Your grandma brought some photos of your dad when he was little. Would you like to see them?" They settled on the bench, Lucas between them like a small bridge across an enormous divide. Evelyn pulled out a photo album with hands that shook slightly. Not the expensive leather-bound volume Nia expected, but something older, more worn. The kind of album that had been looked at enough to show love through use. "This was your dad when he was about your age," Evelyn said, pointing to a photo of a boy with familiar gray eyes and a gap-toothed smile. He'd just lost his front teeth and was convinced he'd never be able to eat apples again. Lucas leaned in, fascinated. "He looks like me." "He does. You have his smile, his eyes, even the way you tilt your head when you're thinking about something." Evelyn turned the page. And this was him at his first soccer game. He was terrible at it, kept stopping to pick flowers instead of chasing the ball. Despite herself, Nia found herself leaning in too, seeing Daniel Crowhurst not as the distant figure from news articles, but as a child, goofy and real, and loved by the woman sitting beside her. "What else did he like?" Lucas asked, and Nia heard the hunger in his voice, the need every child has to understand where they came from, who their people were. Evelyn seemed to hear it too. Her nervousness eased slightly as she fell into the rhythm of storytelling, sharing memories that painted her son in colors Nia had never imagined. Daniel, who brought home stray cats and argued they needed rescuing. Daniel, who got in trouble for giving his lunch to classmates who'd forgotten theirs. Daniel, who cried at sad movies and wrote poetry he never showed anyone. "He sounds nice," Lucas said after a particularly sweet story about Daniel defending a bullied classmate. "I wish I could have met him." "Me too, sweetheart." Evelyn's voice broke on the words. "He would have loved you so much. He would have been so proud of the person you're becoming." Lucas was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, with the directness only children possess, "Why were you fighting with Aunt Nia about me?" The question landed like a stone in still water, ripples of discomfort spreading across Evelyn's face. Nia started to intervene, to redirect, but Evelyn held up a gentle hand. "That's a fair question," she said, speaking directly to Lucas. "I made some really big mistakes. When I found out you existed, I was so sad about losing your dad that I didn't think clearly. I thought if I could take care of you, give you things, it would make the sadness go away. But I didn't stop to think about what you needed. I only thought about what I wanted." Aunt Nia says wanting things for yourself isn't always bad. She's right, but it's bad when you hurt other people to get them. And I almost hurt you and Aunt Nia because I was thinking like a businesswoman instead of a grandmother. Evelyn glanced at Nia, something like gratitude in her expression. Your Aunt Nia protected you from my mistakes. She's a pretty amazing person. Lucas nodded as if this was obvious fact. She takes care of me even when she's really tired, and she always keeps her promises. Then you're very lucky to have her. Evelyn said it without bitterness, without the competitive edge that might have poisoned the moment, just simple acknowledgement of truth. They spent the next 45 minutes in the park, the conversation gradually becoming easier as Lucas warmed up. He showed Evelyn his favorite climbing structure, told her about his teacher and his cat, and the book series he was reading. Evelyn listened with the kind of attention that made Lucas bloom, asking questions that showed she cared about his answers, laughing at his jokes even when they didn't quite land. Nia watched it all with a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite name: relief that it was going well, grief for what Maya was missing, fear that this fragile piece could still shatter. And underneath it all, something that might have been hope, the tentative belief that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real from the wreckage of where they'd started. When the hour was up, Evelyn stood reluctantly. I should probably go. Let you get back to your Saturday. Will you come back? Lucas asked, and Nia heard the vulnerability in the question, the fear of another person disappearing. If Aunt Nia says it's okay, I'd love to come back. Maybe next week? We could go to the Science Museum if you'd like. They have a new dinosaur exhibit. Lucas's eyes lit up, but he looked to Nia for confirmation. She appreciated that, the automatic check-in that showed where his security still lay. We can plan on it, Nia said. Maybe next Saturday afternoon? I'll be there. Evelyn knelt down to Lucas's eye level. Thank you for giving me a chance to know you. It means more than I can say. Lucas surprised them both by stepping forward and hugging her, a quick child's embrace that was over almost before it started. But Evelyn's face as she stood back up showed how much that simple gesture had meant, tears streaming down her cheeks that she didn't bother hiding. After she left, Lucas took Nia's hand as they walked home. She's sad, he observed. She is. She misses your dad very much. Like I miss my mom? Exactly like that. Nia squeezed his hand. Maybe we can help each other with the sad parts. Maybe that's what families do. Are we a family now? Me and you and Grandma Evelyn? The question hit Nia unexpectedly hard. Family. Not the family she'd planned when Maya was alive, not the family Evelyn had tried to force into existence, but something new being built from honesty and second chances. Yeah, baby, I think maybe we are. The Saturday visits became routine over the next 3 months, each one slightly longer, slightly easier than the last. Evelyn learned to navigate Lucas's world, his preferences, his boundaries, his need for predictability. She brought thoughtful gifts instead of expensive ones, books Lucas mentioned wanting instead of toys meant to impress. She asked Nia's permission before planning activities, respected the bedtime and homework schedules that structured Lucas's life, and most importantly, never suggested that life with her could or should replace what he already had. Dr. Okonkwo monitored the progress with professional satisfaction, gradually extending the visits and eventually approving unsupervised time. The first time Evelyn took Lucas to the museum alone, Nia spent the entire 3 hours anxiously checking her phone. But Lucas came home happy and chattering about pterodactyls, and Evelyn returned him exactly when she'd promised. Trust, Nia was learning, was built through 1,000 small demonstrations of reliability. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on a rainy Tuesday in February. Nia's car had broken down, leaving her stranded at the grocery store with a shift at the diner starting in 45 minutes, and no way to get Lucas from school. She called the usual backups. Her mother was at work, her neighbor was sick, the school's aftercare program was full. Desperation made her do something she'd never done before. She called Evelyn. I know this isn't our scheduled day, Nia said, hating the vulnerability in her voice, but I'm in a bind and I need help. Can you pick up Lucas from school and watch him until I get off work tonight? It would be about 5 hours. There was a pause on the other end, and Nia braced herself for complications or conditions. Instead, Evelyn's voice came back warm with something that sounded like gratitude. Of course. Text me the school address and what time to pick him up. Does he have homework I should know about? Math worksheet and reading. He knows the routine. Nia felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you. Thank you. Nia, Evelyn's voice was gentle. You don't have to thank me for being a grandmother. This is what family does. When Nia finally made it to Evelyn's building that evening, the doorman now recognizing her and waving her through without the scrutiny of those first visits, she found Lucas and Evelyn at the kitchen table working through the math homework together. Not in the formal dining room or the study that looked like it belonged in a magazine, but in the actual kitchen with the marble counters and professional appliances that probably cost more than Nia's annual salary. Aunt Nia! Lucas jumped up, running to hug her. Grandma Evelyn made spaghetti, and we did my homework, and she's terrible at math just like you. Evelyn laughed, standing to greet Nia with a warmth that had become genuine over the months. I had to Google long division. Apparently I've forgotten everything except calculus, which is completely useless for second-grade homework. Nia felt something shift in the moment, a letting go of the last defensive walls she'd maintained. This wasn't a performance or strategy. This was just her son having dinner with his grandmother, complaining about math, living a completely normal evening that happened to take place in a penthouse. Thank you, Nia said again, but this time the words carried different weight. Not just gratitude for the favor, but acknowledgement of everything that had changed between them. Stay for dinner, Evelyn offered, and it wasn't a command or obligation, just an invitation. There's plenty, and I'd like the company. They ate together in that expensive kitchen, Lucas chattering between them about school and his friends, and the injustice of having to learn multiplication tables. And Nia watched Evelyn respond with the patience of someone who'd learned that listening was more valuable than fixing, that presence mattered more than solutions. After Lucas fell asleep on the couch during a movie, Nia and Evelyn found themselves talking quietly in the kitchen over coffee, the conversation drifting into territory they'd carefully avoided before. I visit Daniel's grave every Sunday, Evelyn said, staring into her cup. I know you take Lucas there sometimes too. I've seen the flowers you leave. He should know where his father is, that Daniel was real, that he mattered. Would you? Evelyn hesitated, vulnerability clear in her voice. Would you consider going together sometime? You and Lucas and me? I'd like him to see that we all love Daniel, that even though things got complicated, we're united in remembering him. Nia thought about that rainy morning in the cemetery that had started everything, the shock and fear and immediate defensive walls. Thought about how far they'd traveled from that moment to this one. I think that would be good, she said. Maya, too. Lucas should see that all of us honor the people we've lost. Maya. Evelyn repeated the name carefully, like she was learning a new language. I never knew her, but I've learned about her through you, through Lucas's stories. She sounds like she was extraordinary. She was. Nia felt the familiar ache of loss, but also something else, gratitude that Maya's memory was being preserved, spoken about, kept alive. She made me promise to protect Lucas from being used, from being seen as anything except a child who deserved love. I think I took that to mean I had to protect him from you specifically, but maybe what she really meant was to protect him from anyone who couldn't love him for who he is. Including me when I was that person. Yeah. But you're not that person anymore. Nia met Evelyn's eyes. Or maybe you always had the capacity to be this person. You just needed someone to demand it from you. Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. I think about the custody battle sometimes. About how close I came to destroying all of this because I couldn't separate what I wanted from what was right. If Richard had succeeded with that hospital records leak, if I'd won the case the way I was originally pursuing it, Lucas would have a bedroom in this penthouse and a trust fund and every material advantage, Nia finished. But he'd be terrified and angry and traumatized. He'd have things instead of peace. And I'd have won the battle but lost any chance of winning him. Evelyn's voice was thick with emotion. That's what you tried to tell me from the beginning, wasn't it? That you can't purchase love. You can only earn it through showing up, through being trustworthy, through proving that your presence adds to someone's life instead of diminishing it. I didn't know if you could learn that, Nia admitted. People who've had power their whole lives, sometimes they can't imagine a different way of being. I almost couldn't. The day after that park conversation when I promised to withdraw the case, My first instinct when I saw the news coverage was to attack, to make you the villain so I could stay the hero in my own story. Evelyn's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Firing Richard, dismantling my own legal strategy, accepting that I might never get what I wanted, those were the hardest things I've ever done, harder than any business deal or hostile takeover. Why did you do it then? Because Marcus Webb asked me a question I couldn't stop thinking about. He asked what mattered more, winning or being someone Lucas could actually love when this was over. Evelyn looked toward the living room where Lucas slept, peaceful and secure. I realized I'd spent my whole life optimizing for winning, and in the process, I'd lost my husband to work, lost my son to the pressure I put on him, and was about to lose my grandson to my own inability to see him as anything except another battle to win. So you chose differently. I chose to lose on my terms instead of winning on terms that would destroy everything that mattered. Evelyn smiled, but there were tears in her eyes. Turns out, losing was the only way to get what I actually needed. Not custody or control, but this. Saturday afternoons at the park, math homework at the kitchen table, Lucas falling asleep during movies and trusting that he's safe here. Naya reached across the table and took Evelyn's hand, a gesture that would have been impossible 6 months ago. You're a good grandmother. Lucas is lucky to have you in his life. I'm the lucky one. Evelyn squeezed back. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. You're teaching me how to be family instead of just related. That's a gift I can never repay. You repay it by showing up, by keeping your promises, by loving him consistently even when it's inconvenient. Naya paused. And by remembering that I'm not your enemy. We're on the same team now. The team of making sure Lucas is okay. Always. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Two women who'd started as adversaries learning to become allies, maybe even friends. When Nia finally woke Lucas to take him home, Evelyn walked them to the elevator with a naturalness that spoke to routine rather than performance. Same time next Saturday? She asked Lucas, who nodded sleepily. Can we go to the aquarium? Tyler went and said the sharks are awesome. Aquarium it is. Evelyn looked to Nia for confirmation, the automatic check-in that showed she'd learned the hierarchy. If that works for Aunt Nia's schedule? I'm off Saturday. That works perfectly. In the elevator, Lucas leaned against Nia's side. I like having a grandma. Yeah? Yeah, it makes the family bigger, less lonely. He yawned. Do you think my mom would be happy that we're friends with Grandma Evelyn? Nia thought about Maya in that hospital bed, making her promise to protect Lucas from being used, but also about the Maya who'd fallen in love with Daniel despite knowing the complications it would bring, who'd believed in the possibility of people being better than their circumstances suggested. I think your mom would be proud, Nia said honestly. She'd be proud that we found a way to give you more love instead of less. That's what she always wanted for you. Good. Lucas's eyes were already closing. I don't want anyone to be sad anymore. Me neither, baby. Me neither. Spring arrived with the kind of gentle warmth that made everything feel possible. Nia's car got fixed with help from the trust fund Evelyn had established, the first time Nia had accessed it, and only after long conversations with Evelyn about boundaries and independence. They'd agreed on a framework. The trust covered major expenses related to Lucas's well-being and education, but Nia maintained primary financial responsibility for day-to-day life. It preserved her autonomy while providing security for Lucas's future. The arrangement worked because both women had learned to communicate, to negotiate, to find solutions that prioritized Lucas's needs over their own egos. On a Sunday in late April, they went together to the cemetery as they'd discussed, Nia, Lucas, and Evelyn. They visited Daniel's grave first, where Evelyn told stories Lucas had never heard, and Nia added details from Maya's memories. Then they walked to Maya's grave, where Nia placed fresh flowers, and Evelyn stood quietly, paying respects to a woman she'd never known but had learned to honor. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly as they stood at Maya's headstone. She wasn't talking to Nia, but to Maya directly, her voice carrying across whatever divide separated the living from the dead. Thank you for loving my son. Thank you for giving him Lucas. And thank you for trusting someone extraordinary to raise your child. I promise I'll do everything I can to honor that trust. Lucas placed his own small bouquet on his mother's grave, a ritual Nia had taught him. "Hi, Mama. I brought Grandma Evelyn to meet you. She's nice. I think you'd like her." Nia felt tears streaming down her face, but they weren't entirely sad. There was grief there, always would be, but also gratitude for the family they'd built from loss, for the way love could expand instead of compete, for the fact that Lucas had multiple people who would fight for his happiness. As they walked back to the car, Lucas between them holding both their hands, Evelyn spoke quietly enough that only Nia could hear. "I got something in the mail yesterday. The final court order officially dismissing the custody case and confirming your guardianship. It included a note from the judge." "What did it say?" "That in 30 years on the bench, she'd never seen a case transform the way ours did. That it gave her hope that even the most contentious situations could find resolution when people chose love over winning." Evelyn paused. "She was right. She gestured to Lucas swinging between them. "This is better than anything I could have won in court." "Yeah," Nia agreed. "It really is." 2 years later, Nia stood in the crowd at Lucas's elementary school graduation, watching him receive an academic achievement award. Evelyn stood beside her, having taken the afternoon off from the company she'd restructured to be less consuming, more balanced. They'd both learned the value of showing up for the small moments, not just the big ones. Lucas spotted them in the crowd and waved enthusiastically, his gap-toothed grin so much like the photos of his father that both women felt their hearts catch. After the ceremony, he ran to them with his certificate, wanting to share his achievement with the two most important people in his world. "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" he asked, knowing the answer would be yes because they'd established their own traditions. Achievements warranted ice cream, just as bad days warranted extra cuddle time and regular days warranted gratitude for the ordinary gift of being together. They went to the small ice cream shop near Nia's apartment, the three of them crowded into a booth designed for two. Lucas sat between them like always, the physical representation of what they'd built, a family that didn't fit traditional templates but worked precisely because they'd let go of templates entirely. "Aunt Nia," Lucas said around a mouthful of chocolate chip, "Tyler's mom said you used to be poor. What does that mean?" Nia and Evelyn exchanged glances, navigating the moment together as they'd learned to do. "It means we didn't have as much money as some people," Nia said carefully. "We had to be very careful about what we spent, and we couldn't afford everything we might have wanted." "Are we still poor?" "We're comfortable," Nia said. "We have what we need and some of what we want. That's a good place to be." "But Grandma Evelyn is rich, right? Tyler's mom said she's like super rich." Evelyn set down her spoon, giving Lucas her full attention. "I have a lot of money, yes, but you know what I learned? Money is just a tool. It can help with some things, but it can't buy the things that actually matter. It can't buy love or trust or the feeling of belonging somewhere. Those things you earn through how you treat people." "Like how you had to earn us trusting you?" "Exactly like that." Evelyn's voice was warm. "I had all the money in the world, but I didn't have you. And I learned that having you, being part of your life, was worth more than anything money could buy." Lucas considered this, his 9-year-old brain working through concepts that many adults never mastered. "So we're rich in family?" "Yes," Nia said, her throat tight with emotion. "We're very rich in family." That evening, after Lucas was in bed, Nia and Evelyn sat on the fire escape of the apartment, the same fire escape where Nia had cried after the interview, where she'd processed so much fear and uncertainty. But tonight, there was only peace and the comfortable silence of people who'd earned the right to exist together without constant performance. "I've been thinking," Evelyn said, looking out at the city lights, "about setting up a foundation in Daniel and Maya's names. Something that helps single parents access childcare and education support. Something that makes sure other kids don't suffer because their caregivers are working multiple jobs just to survive." "That's a beautiful idea. I was hoping you'd help me run it." Evelyn turned to face Nia. "You understand what families like yours need in ways I never could, and I have resources to make it happen. Together, we could actually make a difference." Nia felt the weight of the offer, not just the practical implications, but what it represented. Full partnership, acknowledgement of her expertise and value, a future built together instead of in parallel. I'd need to keep working, Nia said. I'm not ready to give up my independence entirely. I wouldn't ask you to. Maybe you transition to part-time at the diner, part-time with the foundation. We build something that gives you stability without taking away your autonomy. Evelyn smiled. I'm learning to negotiate instead of dictate. How am I doing? Pretty well, actually. Nia returned the smile. Let's talk details, but yeah, I'm interested. They sat there planning late into the night. Two women who'd started at opposite ends of every spectrum finding common ground in their shared love for a child and their hard-won respect for each other. Somewhere in the apartment, Lucas slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he was loved by multiple people who'd figured out how to love him without competing for his affection. The foundation launched the following year with significant media attention. The narrative had shifted from billionaire custody battle to unlikely partnership creates change, a redemption arc that both women found slightly uncomfortable, but ultimately accepted if it meant helping other families. During the press conference announcing the foundation, a reporter asked Nia how she'd forgiven Evelyn for the custody battle. Nia thought carefully before answering. I don't know that forgiveness is the right word. What we have is something more complicated and maybe more real. We have mutual respect built through accountability and change. Evelyn proved she could be different than she was, and I proved I could trust again even after being hurt. We both chose Lucas's well-being over our own egos, and that created space for something new to grow. And what would you say to other families facing similar conflicts? Another reporter asked. I'd say that love isn't finite. Letting someone else love your child doesn't mean there's less love for you. It means there's more love in the child's life. But, Nia held up a hand. That only works if everyone involved is willing to do the hard work of respecting boundaries, communicating honestly, and putting the child first. Not just saying they put the child first, but actually doing it even when it costs them something they want. Evelyn added her own perspective. I'd say that sometimes losing is the only way to win what actually matters. I tried to take custody through force and money, and I would have destroyed everything in the process. Instead, I lost that battle but gained a grandson who actually wants me in his life. That's a trade I'd make every single time. The questions continued, but Lucas, who'd been allowed to attend the press conference, tugged on Nia's sleeve. Can we go now? You promised we'd get pizza after. Both women laughed, the tension of the public moment breaking. This was real life, not the carefully constructed narrative for cameras, but a 9-year-old who'd been patient long enough and wanted dinner. We can go, Nia confirmed. Pizza sounds perfect, Evelyn agreed. They left the press conference together, cameras following them, but mattering less than the simple fact of Lucas's hand in Nia's, Evelyn walking beside them, all three moving toward the future they'd built from the ruins of where they'd started. 5 years after that first meeting in the cemetery, Lucas stood in Evelyn's penthouse for a different kind of gathering, his 14th birthday party. His friends from school mingled awkwardly with the elegance of the space, but Lucas himself was completely at ease, comfortable navigating both worlds because both had become home. Nia watched him joke with his friends, noticed how he'd grown into the best parts of both his parents, Daniel's thoughtfulness and Maya's fierce kindness. He'd asked for donations to the foundation instead of gifts, wanting his birthday to help other kids the way he'd been helped. Evelyn came to stand beside her, both women taking a moment away from the party chaos. He's extraordinary, Evelyn said quietly. Yeah, Maya would be so proud. Daniel, too. Evelyn paused. Can I tell you something? I dream about him sometimes. About Daniel. And in the dreams, he knows about Lucas. He's grateful that we figured out how to work together, that Lucas has both of us instead of just one. I dream about Maya, too, Nia admitted. She tells me I did good. That protecting Lucas didn't mean isolating him from family. It meant making sure family was healthy enough to be part of his life. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lucas blow out candles surrounded by people who loved him. The question mark from his childhood drawing had been answered definitively, not through court orders or custody agreements, but through years of showing up, of choosing each other, of building trust through consistent action. I have something for you, Evelyn said, pulling out an envelope. I was going to save it for later, but this feels like the right moment. Nia opened it to find legal documents. Adoption papers making Lucas legally Nia's son, not just his guardian. Her name listed as parent, all the legal protections that came with that designation. "You're already his mother in every way that matters," Evelyn said. "This just makes the law recognize what's always been true. I've also updated my will to reflect that you're his parent and that any inheritance comes to him through you on whatever timeline you deem appropriate. No more question about his guardianship, no more vulnerability if something happens to me or if I—" She stopped, then continued honestly, "if I ever backslide into old patterns. This protects you both." Nia felt tears streaming down her face. "Evelyn, this is what should have been established from the beginning. You've been his mother since Maya died. Hell, you were co-parenting with Maya before that. This is just paperwork catching up to reality." Evelyn's own eyes were damp. "And it's my way of saying thank you. Thank you for trusting me with him. Thank you for teaching me what family actually means. Thank you for being exactly the person Maya knew you were when she made you his guardian." Nia pulled Evelyn into a hug, right there in the middle of the party with Lucas's friends pretending not to notice the adults being emotional. When they pulled apart, both were crying openly, but neither cared. Lucas appeared beside them, worried. "Why are you crying? Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby," Nia said, kneeling to his eye level, even though he was almost as tall as her now. "Everything's right. Grandma Evelyn just gave me the best gift, the legal paperwork that says what we've always known, that you're my son, forever and officially." Lucas's face split into a grin. "So you're really my mom now? Like, officially?" "Officially, if you want that." "Of course I want that. You've always been my mom." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Then, with the adaptability of teenagers, "Can I tell my friends? Tyler's going to think this is so cool." He ran off before they could answer, and they heard him announcing to his friends that his aunt was now officially his mom. And wasn't that awesome? His friends, with the beautiful acceptance of adolescents who'd grown up knowing Lucas's complicated family situation, offered congratulations, and then immediately returned to arguing about video games. Evelyn laughed through her tears. That's probably the least dramatic response possible to a legal adoption. That's because it doesn't change anything for him. He's secure enough in who we are to each other that paperwork is just paperwork. Nia wiped her eyes. That's the real gift, you know? Not the adoption papers, but the fact that he never has to wonder if he's loved or where he belongs. He knows. Completely and without question. That's all Maya wanted for him. And all Daniel would have wanted too. Nia watched Lucas with his friends, happy and whole. We did it. We gave him what they both hoped he'd have. The party continued around them, but Nia found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. From that rainy cemetery morning when everything seemed impossible, through the legal battles and media scrutiny and painful growth, to this moment of complete peace. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and hard conversations and moments when trust felt too expensive to risk. But they'd risked it anyway. They'd chosen the harder path of reconciliation over the easier path of continued conflict. And in doing so, they'd created something neither of them could have built alone. A family that was stronger for having been tested, deeper for having been fought for, more authentic for having been earned rather than assumed. As the party wound down and Lucas's friends started leaving, Evelyn pulled Lucas aside for a private moment. Nia watched from across the room, giving them space while staying close enough to see Lucas's face light up at whatever Evelyn was saying. Later, when it was just the three of them cleaning up, Lucas shared what his grandmother had told him. Grandma Evelyn said that finding me was like getting a piece of my dad back, that I remind her of him in good ways, ways that make her happy instead of sad. His voice was thoughtful. And she said thank you for sharing me with her, that she knows she messed up at first, but that you gave her a chance to be better. She did become better, Nia confirmed. People can change if they want to badly enough, and if someone believes they can. Did you always believe she could? No, Nia admitted, because she'd promised Lucas she'd always tell him the truth. At first, I thought she was too stuck in her ways, too used to getting what she wanted through money and power, but she proved me wrong. She showed me that even people who seem set in their patterns can choose differently if they have good enough reasons. And I was the good enough reason? You were the best reason. Nia pulled him close. You're always the best reason for choosing love over fear. They finished cleaning in comfortable silence, the three of them moving around each other with the ease of family who'd learned each other's rhythms. When everything was packed away, Evelyn walked them to the elevator like always. Same time next week? She asked Lucas. Can we go rock climbing? The gym near school has a teen beginner class. Rock climbing it is. I'll sign us up. Evelyn kissed his forehead, then turned to Nia. Thank you, for today, for every day, for being exactly who you are. Right back at you, Nia said, meaning it completely. In the elevator, Lucas leaned against Nia's shoulder, tired from the party, but happy. This was a good birthday. Yeah? Yeah, I have everything I need. You, Grandma Evelyn, my friends, the foundation helping other kids. It's good. Nia felt her heart swell with an emotion almost too big to name. This was what they'd fought for, what Maya had died trusting her to create, a child who felt secure and loved and whole. It is good, she agreed. It's really, really good. They rode home through the city that had witnessed their entire journey, from cemetery confrontation to legal battle to this moment of absolute peace. The streets looked different now, not because anything physical had changed, but because Nia herself had changed. She'd learned to trust again after being hurt, to forgive without forgetting, to build bridges instead of walls. And in learning those things, she'd given Lucas the greatest gift possible, a family that was complicated and imperfect and absolutely real, a family that had been tested by fire and come through stronger, a family that proved love was always more powerful than money, that connection mattered more than control, and that sometimes the people you start out fighting become the allies you need most. Years later, when Lucas graduated from high school, at the top of his class with a full scholarship to college, both Nia and Evelyn were in the audience. He'd chosen to study social work, inspired by the foundation and by the example of the women who'd raised him, women who'd shown him that real strength came from vulnerability, real power from choosing love over winning, and real family from the commitment to show up even when it was hard. In his valedictorian speech, he talked about second chances and chosen family and the importance of fighting for what mattered. He didn't mention the custody battle explicitly, but everyone who knew their story understood what he was really saying, that the greatest gift his family had given him wasn't money or opportunity, but the example of people choosing to be better than their worst impulses. After the ceremony, the three of them took photos together, a family that didn't fit any traditional definition but worked perfectly anyway. Reporters who'd covered the original custody battle were there, documenting not the conflict but the resolution, the proof that even the messiest situations could find their way to peace. Any regrets? A reporter asked Evelyn. She looked at Lucas, beaming in his cap and gown, then at Nia beside him, and smiled. Only that I didn't understand sooner what actually mattered. But no regrets about where we ended up. This, she gestured to Lucas and Nia, this is better than anything I could have forced into existence. This is real. And you? The reporter turned to Nia. Any final thoughts on your journey? Nia thought about Maya making her promise to protect Lucas, about the fear and anger of those early days, about the slow transformation from enemies to family. I'd say that love isn't about ownership, she said finally. It's about creating space for people to grow, making room for more love instead of less, and trusting that there's enough to go around. We fought over Lucas because we both loved him. We became family when we learned to love him together. The reporter nodded, satisfied with the soundbite. But Lucas pulled both women close, creating a private moment in the public chaos. I love you both, he said simply. Thank you for figuring it out. Thank you for choosing me over your pride. Always, Evelyn and Nia said together, and meant it with everything they had. The question mark from that long-ago drawing had been answered, not with a simple yes or no, but with something far more valuable, a story of redemption and growth, of women who'd started as adversaries and became partners in the shared project of raising an extraordinary young man. And as they walked away from the graduation ceremony together, Lucas between them exactly where he belonged, they carried with them the knowledge that sometimes the greatest victories come not from winning battles, but from having the courage to transform them into something better. Something like family, something like love, something like home.